So as I was taking cover over the top of this wall, we get contact. So it was me, Nige, my second in command, was standing just to the side of me, and we both watched a line of rounds come straight up the earth in front of us and go straight up the wall in between us. Both ducked down and then got back up and started engaging. My name is Lee West. I served as a Royal Marines Commando from 2003 to 2020. Medically retired in 2020 after 17 years as a colour sergeant. So I grew up in Swansea, South Wales in the UK. I grew up in a council estate called Town Hill. It was regarded as, and still is, the most deprived council estate in Wales and the biggest. So I guess council estate in US language would be social housing, these really large sprawling estates. And in the UK, they tend to be very closed in. They expanded from industrial injection into areas, so large port cities where Swansea is. It's on the coast by the beach, large port. So the copper trade really blew up in that area. So you have a lot of influx of workers, working class families who needed somewhere to live. And these long rows of terraced houses would crop up around the city. And Town Hill was one of these, regarded as a rough area. And I've seen enough of the world to know that I didn't have some kind of horrendously tough upbringing. It was poor. We were not at the top of the social ladder. Everyone in those areas. And within that area, I myself wasn't at the top of the social ladder. I wasn't going to be getting the new football and the new soccer boots and the new computer games ahead of anybody else. But it was brilliant because what you tend to find in those areas is the lack of material, money and social aspects drive you to create your own fun and your own initiatives. And that's how it was. We'd always be outside. An older brother, a younger sister. She was about 8 years younger than me, so she came along well after. But my brother was 2 years between us, so we'd just always be out exploring down the parks. We lived on top of a hill, so anywhere you went was up or down. So you're always out running and keeping fit and just being adventurous. As long as you were back by the time the street lights went off, you could pretty much do what you wanted. Parents were obviously busy working. So it was a great adventurous life. Whatever sport was on TV, you'd grab some chalk from the local building site and draw some cricket wickets or goals on the pavements outside. Use one of the cars parked there as one of the goal posts and the curb as the other one, which you wouldn't get away with that these days, kicking a football against somebody's parked car. And yeah, it was just an all-round, very austere but robust upbringing, full of adventure and getting into mischief, not sort of criminal mischief, but mischief that young boys get into. School-wise, I wasn't best sum up my school as in I had academic ability, but not the interest. And school came too early for me, I believe. I was quite immature, which boys are anyway in school. And I think I was even more immature than the average boy at school. Because even though I had the ability, and a lot of teachers would sum it up and say, when I get in trouble, Lee got so much ability if you just put your mind to it. But I didn't want to put my mind to it. I could have. And when in spells I did, it was fine. And I guess I was able to pull it out of the bag for exams. So I wouldn't pay any attention all term and then just pass the exam just about. And because I just wanted to be outside, running around. I was in the football team, basketball team, rugby team, athletics, cross country. So everything was to do with being outside, running around and enjoying life. Yeah, so that was sort of the school days. And looking back on it is a lot of people, they go to school and being from a poor area, there are not a lot of options and there's not a lot of education. I didn't know what uni was about. And having a daughter now in the States, it's a lot of people are educated about uni from a young age. And in the UK, a lot more now than back then. But where I came from, it wasn't on the table. It was, you go to school, you get through it, you leave and get a job, and then you work out what you want to do. And that's what it was. I was like, I just need to get through school, I'll get a job, and then I'll find an adventure. And that is how it panned out.
So,
the military thing wasn't something on the horizon really as a youngster. For a lot of people who end up going that way, it is. And for a lot of people who come from a traumatic childhood, which I didn't. So we didn't have a lot of money, but it wasn't abusive or traumatic in any sort of way. It was normal, I guess, for the areas that I lived in. And a lot of people who end up joining the military, they are running away from something, whatever it is, from their childhood or maybe their later teens. They're going to the military to get away from something. And it was the opposite for me. I was running towards something because I wanted that adventure. There wasn't something, I need to get away from this. There's something out there for me and I need to go and find it, because I live in a council estate. It's not going to land on my lap. It's not going to arrive from the heavens. I got to go and find it. My grandfather was the only military influence in my whole family. It's quite a large family. My father had 5 sisters. My mother had 5 brothers, so a lot of cousins. And my grandfather had a lot of brothers and sisters as well. So a really big extended family. And he was the only military influence growing up. But also he wasn't, because he was on the Lancaster bombers for the Royal Air Force in the Second World War, which blows my mind. The survival rate was 1 in 3 for those sorties to Germany. It's just unbelievable, bravery of these guys. And he never spoke about it. And that wasn't from him being some broody, moody war veteran who didn't want to talk about it. He turned to the Lord heavily after the Second World War, met my grandmother and became devout Christians. And his life completely changed direction into that. And it was because of that lifestyle, he just didn't want to talk about that portion of his life. And I also think he had a lot of guilt, is why he went that direction and why he didn't want to talk about it, because those bombing raids in Germany were mass bombing, carpet bombing Dresden and Frankfurt, the cities in northern Germany. And I think he held a lot of guilt of that. And I hate that, or I hate it. I regret that I didn't maybe push him for some more stories, but that we didn't get the stories, because I would have loved to hear them. So there wasn't a massive military influence in my early life. There was no real burning desire from a young age to go into the military. I loved running around playing army, as most young lads do. Loved the films like Rambo and Predator and Commando, things like that. Although I knew that they were Hollywood. I wasn't watching them going, oh, that is what it would be like if I joined the military. But I did have an interest in it. But a lot of guys in school were then already hooked on, they're going to join the military. And I can't remember anybody coming to our school to do a recruitment talk. We did have a couple of days up at an army camp. We went and did the assault course, which I loved, crossing rivers, because I was into outdoor activities anyway. But there was nothing in my teen years that was really suggesting to me that I was going to join the military. And as it happened, I left school and went and got a job, went to work in a warehouse. And that was the plan. I'll leave school, I'll get a job, and then something's going to spark my interest, and then I'll go fully for it. And I started to read a lot of books, sort of military books, and they were not your sort of the Andy McNabb type ones, although I did read some of those, just the personal story ones about these guys who were like me. They'd come from a poor background. They had joined the military and they'd gone on this unbelievable adventure, traveling the world, ended up going to like the Falklands War, Northern Ireland conflict, Iraq, and joining the special forces. And I just reading these books and I was mesmerized about how I could have this life. I could easily just go and do this. And I started to really get into it. And any money that I got hold of, I would get a bus into town, go and look at the bookstores, picked one, which was really vital, because once I got home with it on the bus, there was no money to go and buy another one if it wasn't that good. And my interest started to develop from there. So there wasn't any instance of anybody coming to convince me or corral me into it. It was a personal inspiration that I'd found myself. I started to get more and more interested in it. So I'd moved from that job and got a job in the civil service, or our equivalent of your DMV, DVLA, which from where I'd come from was a really great job. It was public sector job. You're going to get a pension eventually. It was stable pay, secure job, nothing too strenuous. And it was a real victory for me at that point, getting that job. And it was great. The office block of the DVLA looked a big, massive office block on the corner, on the outskirts of my city, Swansea, looking out towards a large range called Brecon Beacons. And it's a place where a lot of the British Armed Forces train. So every day I'd just be sat looking out over these mountain ranges and peaks and saying to myself, there's something else. This is great. You've done really well from where you come from, but there's still something else I need to go and search. And the military thing started to play on my mind after reading these books. So I joined the reserves. There was a reserve army unit, Royal Engineers, in my town of Swansea. So I went along. I thought, okay, you are quite an impulsive person. So instead of just going head first into it, let's go and dip our toes, see if I suit them, see if it suits me, and we'll make a decision from there. So I joined the Royal Engineers, loved it, excelled at it, and then did speak to a couple of friends, cousins, who had joined the Royal Marines. And that wasn't the reason that I chose them. It was after reading these books, I'd set my sights on, I want to go into one of the more respected or the most respected units of the British Armed Forces, which would either be from basic entry. The only two, if you wanted that route, were the Parachute Regiment, who were the elite unit of the army, or the Royal Marines Commandos. So that was the choice. And it could have been the Parachute Regiment. I was still sort of weighing it up. And my thinking on that was that I didn't want to join some sort of standard infantry regiment or some backseat logistics regiment, go through all that training, pass, put their beret on, and see these Marines and paratroopers walking around, giving it the big one. I think, I could have done that. I could have been them. And not just because of the status. It was, I want to do what these guys in the books are doing. I want to go to conflict zones. I want to go on short, small little teams getting sent off and posted everywhere and have that challenge of passing commando training. I want the end goal as well as the challenge of the initial basic training. So the only option was I've got to go for one of these two units. And I spoke to a friend's cousin. He was a Royal Marine Commando serving, got some stories off him. I was a bit concerned about my size, because when you think of a commando, you just think of someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but with the cardiovascular of like Roger Bannister or someone. And he was like, don't worry about your size. We want lean, agile blokes who can run and do body strength circuits. And that was it. I was like, yeah, I'm all in. It's going to be the Royal Marine Commandos. And then taking the plunge. It was, like I said, nobody had come around to talk me into it. So I had to go to the careers office, approach them and apply. It's quite interesting. The one in Swansea at the time, you had to walk through the Army and the RAF side to get to the Navy side. So I think getting to the Navy side to speak about joining the Marines was almost as hard as passing Royal Marine training, because I walked in, there was this big barrel-chested Welsh Guards soldier, Sergeant Major, sat behind the desk. I said, I want to speak to the Navy side, I want to join the Royal Marines. No, good buddy, Welsh Guards you want. It's hard work, that Marine stuff. Come and join the Welsh Guards, be with you Welshmen. And I was there for about 30 minutes trying to convince him. And in the end, he was like, okay, you've passed the test, you can go and speak to him. So I think that's their first test, you got to get past the Army guy. Went next door, and they didn't have a Royal Marine in the office. There was a Navy petty officer. And he, again, cast doubt on my size. I'm not a big guy now, definitely wasn't a big guy then, just skinny as you can imagine. I don't think you're big enough, or you're doing enough weights. I said, well, some, but I've been told to concentrate on running, body strength, pull-ups, press-ups, sit-ups. No, you need to do weights, you're not big enough. So he was casting doubts on whether he was going to send me down for the 4-day selection process. In the end, I passed all he got me to get up on the pull-up bar in the office and do a certain amount of pull-ups, do a few things. He's like, okay, well, you have got the base standard, I will send you down. And he sent me down for the initial, I think it's 5 days it was at the time. You go down to Limston, which is the main training recruitment camp, down in Devon. And they smash you for 5 days. And it was a bizarre feeling at the end of those 5 days, being told you've passed, you've now got the opportunity to come back and try it full time. On the train back home, I was just like, I am absolutely knackered and I just can't wait to get home and go to sleep for 2 days. But I'm also excited that this is it now. I'm in, I got my foot in the door, I am going to join. But when I come back here, it's for 8 months. And there's no, when it's getting a bit rough, you're going to go home for 2 days to sleep it off. It's going to be sustained 8 months punishment. And that was it. I was all in for it. There was no need to convince me or twist my arm. I wanted that adventure and I went and found it. And first day of commando training is iconic and very memorable. So to arrive at Lympstone, which is the Commando Training Centre of the Royal Marines, there's only one way for a recruit to arrive, and that is by train. So the camp has got its own dedicated train platform, Lympstone Commando, a great name for a train platform. And that's the only way you can arrive and leave as a recruit. And the journey there is, you sat there with your shirt and tie, with a skinhead, with 50 other guys who look exactly the same as you, all absolutely bricking it, nervous, excited, and just unbelievable fear of the unknown. And as you arrive, the train track runs along the banks of the River Exe. So on one side, you get this glorious view of this river down in South Devon, across the banks. And then to the left is a view that strikes fear into everybody's heart, because the bottom field assault course runs along the line of the camp, the fence, along that railway track as well. So you look across and you just get a snapshot of the life that you're about to enter into. Guys climbing 30-foot ropes with webbing and rifles, crawling on the assault course, just sprinting, getting smashed by the PTIs, physical training instructors. And it's just a bizarre moment where it's so memorable, but obviously it's coupled with complete fear. And I remember getting there, it pulled up, and it was one lad, 56 of us were meant to join that day, only 55 of us did. One lad, he just said, "I'm not getting off the train." And we tried to convince him, we said, "Come on, mate, we're all a bit nervous. Let's get over it. Let's just at least get on the platform." And he was like, "No, that's it. I'm going home." And I still wonder about that guy now and think it takes you months to get to that point of training, going to the careers office, doing the pre-selection, telling your friends and family that's it, you're joining, saying goodbye to them, to then get all that way and then just go no at the last minute without even giving it a try. So off he went. The other 55 of us got off, stood on the train platform. The drill instructor turns up with his sadistic humour and starts smashing you with press-ups, and that tie's not the same pattern as your shirt, 50 press-ups, and start playing the games with you. And that is it. He then walk you up the hill with all your luggage and straight into day one. You walk into what we call foundation block, which, to paint the picture, would be similar to like your Full Metal Jacket style, one huge dormitory full of metal lockers and bunk beds. 55 of you get put in there, get assigned your bed, and all your inhibitions are soon washed away when you're given 5 minutes to shower and be back outside, and you're faced with 6 shower nozzles, and there's 55 of you scrambling to get in there. And then by the time you're back outside, the shower's rendered useless because you've sweated so much getting all your kit back on to get back outside. And then it builds. Our training is different to USMC training. When you join the Royal Marines, I know you guys, you have your boot camp. You turn up, you do your boot camp, and then you can go infantry and your other sort of specializations. With Royal Marines is when you join to be a Royal Marine Commando. Once you become a Royal Marine Commando, then you can go and specialize in other things. So there's no, and I've heard some of y'all guys talking about contracts. You go to the recruiting office and you say, "Oh, I want to join on this contract," and that's what you're going to do. That doesn't exist it does with the army. You can go and join up to be an engineer and other things. With us, you're going to be a Royal Marine Commando. Once you're a commando, then you're going to work it out. Women weren't allowed to join when I joined. I know they were and are in the USMC. They are now. I think it was about 2019. We opened it up to female applicants. To this date, a female still hasn't passed Royal Marine Commando training. They have passed commando training. What we do within the wider forces is people in the Army, Navy and other arms, like artillery and engineers who we need to work within our brigade, they can come and do a 10-week commando course, which will give them the Green Beret and the Commando Dagger, and then they can work alongside us in the supporting roles. Females have passed that small 10-week commando beat-up course, but as it stands, none have passed it from day one to the end. It's 32 weeks, so 8 months, longest in NATO, I believe, still. And it's progressive. You start off, the first 10 weeks is more your cardiovascular ability. So you're in the gym, climbing ropes, doing all the circuits. They start introducing boots. Well, you're in boots from day one anyway, but they start introducing more carrying your rifle and your webbing and kit, and they bring that into speed marching, and they build it up. And then it moves into more of a tactical phase. So all your field exercises, and then moving on towards the end of it, which is then your commando phase. And that will culminate. Yeah, and as you go through training, you get more comfortable with your surroundings, as with everything, and you start to get a little bit of shore leave. So you're allowed to go out and stay out a little bit later in the local town, chatting to the girls and smelling perfume, which you haven't smelt for months. And we had a couple of games which we'd sussed out with the corporals who were on guard of the camp, where one of them would be that if you came back later than the curfew for whatever stage of training you were in, if you just leveled with the corporal on guard that he wanted to hear stories. He's like, right, tell me a story about when you were in town. What did the girl look like? I want photos on your phone of what she looked like. What did he get up to? This, that, and the other. If you just leveled with him and said, yeah, all right, I'm late because I went back with a girl, or I was talking to some girls and she bombed me out. It was a failure, or I got too drunk. He'd say, okay, fair enough, you've been honest with me. Buy me some magazines, biscuits, shower gel, toothpaste, or whatever from the NAFI, we call it, which is like our little shop on camp. Bring them to me by midday tomorrow, and nothing more would be said. So this was great. So we could stay out late and then just come back. As long as we leveled with him, we'd get away with it. I tried that on one night. I had sort of stayed out late with a girl. Got back. Corporal was there. Why are you late, Recruit West? Oh, yeah, you got some photos here. Do you want to see them? This is the girl I pulled, and this, that, and the other. Fortunately, the duty officer was stood there as well. He intervened. Okay, Recruit, so you're telling us that you've purposely come back late knowing you didn't miss the train, or your taxi driver got lost, one of the normal excuses. You're just saying that you blatantly ignored orders and come back late. Yes, sir, rumbled. So I got caught out on that one. I'd spent all the next day cleaning weapons in the guard room, and then got like busted down. I think I was section leader for the recruits, and busted for that one. Another deal we had was there was a corporal, Big Dave. He would agree to drive us into a town a bit further away, which we wouldn't normally be able to get to on the time that we had off, called Torquay. It's like a seaside party town resort area. What he would do is we'd pay him an inflated fee. He would put us all in the boot of his car, drive out of camp, because he's a corporal, so he's allowed to just drive out of camp, take us to Torquay, unload us. We'd all give him £40 each or whatever it was. We'd all go out till 2, 3 a.m. in the morning in Torquay, and then he'd come and pick us up and then put us back in the boot, and then of course he could drive straight back into camp because he was allowed. This one, again, seemed to be a common theme here with females getting in the way and getting me into trouble. I'd bumped into a hen party, or I think you call them bachelorette party, in Torquay, in the same mood as us. Got on well with one of the girls dressed as a naughty nurse, ended up back at their hotel, and inevitably missed the 2 a.m. pickup by Big Corporal Dave. Imagine the next morning now, you not only got the hangover dread, but also I've got to get a train back to camp and face the music, because Corporal Dave isn't going to be on guard now, probably. There's going to be somebody else, and he's going to want to know where I've been all night. Did that, just absolutely hated my life the whole way back. Got back. Luckily, one of Corporal Dave's mates was on guard, who also was in on this deal and didn't want to get Corporal Dave and himself in trouble. So I turned up, told him what had happened, and he was like, right, you know that we can't report you now because we've done something illegal by smuggling you into Torquay. And that was probably on my mind of why I missed that pickup. I was like, well, they can't really get me in trouble because I could get them in a lot of trouble. Not that I would have. He was like, right, well, we could make up a different story and get you in official trouble, or you could just accept some corporal punishment. I was like, I'll take the corporal punishment. So it was taken around the back where they had some old jail cells, and obviously put in there, slammed my head against the wall, few jabs to the stomach, few jabs to the face, cleaned their weapons for a few hours, and then that was the end of it. So yeah, it was old school. You probably won't get away with that these days, but I was happy with it. They were happy with it. And yeah, I had a clean record at the end. Wow. I would say that the physical stuff, which a lot of people probably struggle more with the mental stuff. And the beauty for me was that I'd joined later than a lot of guys. I was in my early 20s when I joined, which really benefited me because I'd made a conscious decision. I wasn't just playing a game here. I wasn't testing the water. I was joining. I'd made, this is what I want to do with my life, and probably for the rest of my life, or at least a long part of it. So when the chips were down and you were cold, wet, hungry and tired, I had a really big benefit because that part of my mind was saying, you want this, so just get through it. So I could not easily, but I could control that. There was a lot of guys couldn't and didn't, because the pass out rate is quite low. It's generally about 10 or 11 out of that 55 pass. But
only 10 or 11?
10 or 11, yeah, in general. My troop was 19. That was a success, a really high number. Originals, a lot of the guys will get pushed back in training and they will pass out as commandos eventually. But for originals, getting through start to finish, that would be quite a low number. But the speed marching, so when you started putting the weight on, I'm 5'10", so I'm not especially tall guy, so I haven't got big long paces. I found when they started getting longer and harder, there was a few times where I thought to myself, mentally, I'm here. They're going to have to carry me out in an ambulance or just kick me out because they don't want me. I'm not quitting. But as the physical tests got a lot harder, I did start to doubt myself. Well, have I actually? Because I could do something about the mental part. If I haven't got it in me physically, then I can't. And luckily I did. I passed out as King's Badgeman, so that is the top all-round recruit in training, which is an anomaly in the British Armed Forces, our King's Badge thing, whereas most branches, they just have the top recruit. So whoever is the best one of those recruits gets the top award. Whereas our King's Badge it was implemented by King George V when he came to inspect the Royal Marines and said, right, the troop in the last week of training will be known as the King's Squad, and the best all-round recruit will be known as the King's Badgeman, providing he is worthy of the honour. So you don't just get given it because you're the best of that lot. You have to go to a panel towards the end of training. Whoever's been put up for it, it was two of us. So two of us go there. They read all your reports from day one. They inspect you. They ask you questions about the Corps, about history and everything. And then they make a decision. Sometimes it's none of you are worthy. So this troop is not getting a King's Badgeman. And I got that, I think, because, well, I believe I wasn't the fittest. I wasn't the most switched on, but I was the most committed because I knew I wanted to be there till the end. Then that gave me an advantage. And when it came to taking command on certain things as recruits, I was up for it because I wanted training to be a little bit more interesting. I didn't just want to get through it and get to the end and pass. I wanted to get more out of it. So I'd say the physical aspect was probably the hardest part of it. Yeah. At the end of training, you get your King's Squad pass out parade day, and the week leading up to it is actually one of the hardest weeks in training because everything's passed. You're going to pass. It's now you're cleaning, you're polishing, you're practicing your drill, ready for the big pass out parade in front of all your families and the dignitaries. So you get there on the final day. You do a ceremony in our Falklands Hall. So it's a big hall we have there. All the families come in. The Commandant General and the corporals will get up and give a few speeches. We're all stood behind a big, massive curtain, and the families don't know we're stood there. So we're all stood there silent for about 30 minutes. And then eventually they say, introducing 851 Troop, the King's Squad. The curtains come back and we're all stood there. And just like the feeling of pride is just indescribable. All the families are whooping and clapping and looking at you, and you're stood there. And it's the pinnacle, culmination of everything you've been dreaming of for a couple of years up to that point, and you're pinching yourself that you've actually got there. You then hand out all the awards and you get presented your green beret. So we're stood there in our little sort of, we call them cap comforters. They're like little soft wool hats that the commandos used to wear in combat in the Second World War. You march forward, you throw that down into a bin. They give you a green beret, you put it on, you shape it, you salute, and you march off. So that's a really special moment in front of your families. You then march off and then you do a full parade in your dress blues. So you have the Royal Marines band, dress blues, the families outdoor on the big drill square, all the families sat there, and you do your full ceremony and parade. And it's an amazing feeling, and it was different for me. Before I joined, I thought I'm going to get to that day, and because I've achieved everything I've been dreaming of now, that I'm just going to feel complete and fulfilled. And it wasn't at all. It was just like, I've now got myself to the starting blocks of where I want to be. I literally can't wait. We give us 3 days off, and you're going to join your commando unit. And I was like, my hairs are standing up thinking about it now. It's like, I've passed it, brilliant. But I'm glad that's out of the way. I can now go and be what I want to be. And I'm going to join that commando unit, and now I'm going to experience everything that I've been dreaming of for the last couple of years. So it's a really special moment. So my first unit was called 4-2 Commando in Plymouth. It's a fighting unit. So within 3 Commando Brigade, which is the only brigade within our Royal Marines. We're quite small, only about 6,000 of us, which is tiny compared to the US. We have 3 main, what we call fighting units: 40 Commando, 4-2 Commando, 4-5. And they are exactly what it says on the tin. They are our combat-ready, quick reaction, expeditionary units. You go in there, and there's no routine rotation. You go in there, and you're going to go places ready for what might happen in the world. So that was my first one, and that was my choice. I chose, you get to the end of training, you could, unbelievably, some people do it as well. You could go, I want to be a driver now, or now I want to be a storeman or a clerk or something. I was like, I want to be general duties. I want to go and be a commando. I want to go to a fighting unit. I want to experience unit life, which is a big thing as well, because you hear so much about it, actually being there and what you do daily on camp. And then I want to go and do the adventure. So posted down there, my reception wasn't great, which I'd imagine is a lot of newbies, sprogs as we call them. You turn up as a sprog and you know it's coming. You're going to get all the shit jobs. You're going to get all the abuse and all the wind-ups. It didn't help me that I was King's Badgeman, and when you get the King's Badge in the Royal Marines, you have to wear King George's Royal Cipher on your left sleeve in every uniform, in every rank. So even if you managed to get to a general, you'd still wear that. Forever, yeah, on all uniforms, which is a really big honour. Not when you're a sprog and you're turning up in a new unit and they're like going, oh, look at the King's Badge, man. Who does he think he is? Look at big time over here. So that didn't help. And a lot of people don't wear it. And they get in trouble because they're like, no, it's an honour, because they want to avoid that flack. The VIP at my pass out was the commanding officer of 4-2 Commando. And when he presented me the King's Badge, he said, make sure that you are wearing this when you turn up at my unit on Monday morning. So I'm like, well, I've got to wear it. So I stitched it on, wore it. Also didn't help that one of the lance corporals in the troop of the company I joined was the brother of one of the recruits with me in training who I didn't get on with. And he actually got back troop from our troop from a misdemeanor. So of course he's on the phone, yeah, so-and-so's turning up, I don't like him. So I got a bit of heat, and there was quite a few new guys there, so there was a good handful of us, so I wasn't on my own. And what was great and difficult about that initial joining as well was the unit were going straight to Norway for Arctic training. So I turned up at the unit, like, great, this is exactly what I want. And also I'm going straight to one of the most difficult environments and training theatres that we go to, the Arctic. And a lot of people say that's the mark of a Royal Marine Commando, is because we are Britain's or NATO's Arctic warfare specialists. We go there every year as a unit. So to tick that off straight away was brilliant. I've just joined, and now I'm going to go and tick off, I've been to the Arctic. I mean, because a lot of people go years without it, and it's like, oh, you haven't been to the Arctic? Okay, then. So we got there for 3 months. So I'm out in the Arctic for 3 months, one of the hardest places to operate and soldier that you could get. But also now I'm getting all the stick. And I brought it up to a couple of the senior Marines that I thought I was being treated a little bit harshly. I wouldn't call it bullying, because that sort of suggests that it was really sinister. But you accept that you're the sprog and you're going to be getting it tough. But there was 5 of us, and I was always getting it tough, and more tougher than the other ones. So there was a little bit of singling out going on. I did bring this up to a couple of the senior Marines who I'd become friends with. And one I'm still really good friends with to this day. And I said, look, I think I'm getting treated a little bit harsh here. And they were like, I don't think so. I don't think the lads are like, would take it over the line. But they kept an eye on me, and they actually came up to me about a week later and went, yeah, we think you are as well. And they went and spoke to those lads and went, right, wind it in, lads. Yes, he's a sprog. Give him all, but it's gone a bit too far now. So yeah, it was a mix. It was hard, which is always going to be as a sprog, but it was like, what a start. I'm straight. Yeah, the Arctic is regarded so high in the Marines because of how difficult it is. You imagine soldiering in a temperate environment like North America and the UK. Yeah, it's hard, it's wet, but in Norway, everything is 10 times harder. It just, that balance you got to have, because it's minus 20 some days. But you got to move. You're not just in minus 20 surviving. You got to operate. You got to fight. You got to cover distance. And the areas we're in, it's 6 foot of snow. So if you take your skis off, you're sinking up to your waist. So you not only got to learn how to ski cross country, uphill, downhill, which is actually harder than uphill because you're carrying a house on your back and a rifle. So your legs are just absolutely burning trying to slow yourself down the whole time. You'd rather be on the flat or going uphill. And then you got that balance of, we have a saying in the Royal Marines, be bold, start cold. And it's a brilliant saying, and it's stuck with me for life, is what you're doing at the start point of something isn't what you're going to be doing in 30 seconds time, 8 hours time. And you got to remember that, because if you put all your warm clothing on, you're going to start sweating straight away, you're going to start going down, and you're not going to be able to operate. So it's that balance of, you need to put minimal enough layers on that you're not freezing to death, but you're also not overheating and sweating while you're moving. Because then when you stop, if you're sweating too much, well, that's going to instantly freeze on you. And then you're peeling layers off you and ripping raw skin. And your admin is just 10 times more. Everything, you got 2 sets of gloves. You're always taking layers on, taking layers off. You're sleeping in tents. So anytime you get somewhere, it's not just put your poncho up and get your head down. You dig in to camouflage the tent. So you need like big walls around it, putting the tent up, your routine inside there. Again, making sure there's not too much heat in the tent, because then the outside of it's going to freeze. And the fitness levels is, I came back from that. I mean, a past Commando training, pretty fit. And then you spend 3 months in the Arctic, cross-country skiing, and you come back, your fitness levels are just through the roof. You do the ice-breaking drills out there, the infamous ones where they take you out into a lake, they cut a square hole in it, and you just have to ski up to it and plunge yourself into the hole. Then swim to the edge, say your name, rank, number, ask for permission to leave the ice, and then sort of dig yourself out with your ski poles on the ice. So that's like a baptism of fire as well, getting to do that. And yeah, it's regarded as just the hardest level of soldiering you could do. It was quite hard as well, going back to the sort of rough treatment I had, was, of course, I joined March 24th, 2003, which was 4 days after the Iraq invasion. So by the time I pass out of Commando training, November 2003, the unit I go to, all these guys have been to Iraq. And so, of course, now they're giving it the big one. Not only am I the new guy that's just turned up, I haven't been to Iraq either. And some of the guys I had a lot of respect for that, because they did some good work out there. But it was a few of the guys, and I was like, all you really did was eat Burger King in Kuwait and you did go into Iraq, the Marines, of course they did, but just man a bunker position with a GPMG or a 50 cal machine gun. You didn't really do that much, some of you, but you're giving it the big one as if you're like special forces or something, and you were there kicking doors in. So that was an added aspect to it as well, being all stood around all the veterans, giving it the big one. And a lot of those guys, especially the ones who treated me quite roughly, and this tells you a lot about their character, they signed off after about a year of me being there. So their heart wasn't in it, and that showed in their character. Is what they were treating me quite rough. So yeah, Iraq the invasion had happened, and then there was talk about us going back out as a unit later that summer. It didn't come off. Instead, we had a trip to the USA. So we sailed out on our ship HMS Ocean. It's been decommissioned now, to Norfolk Naval Base. So sailed out to Virginia. And I remember we sailed into Norfolk, and just looking at these US carriers, because Ocean that we were on at the time, it was a helicopter carrier, so it couldn't have fast air or anything. It was just for it was a Commando helicopter carrier, but it was our actual biggest ship in the fleet. And I remember going past these US carriers thinking, Jesus, they're 10 times the size. And then we got off in Norfolk and we went to like Subway or something to eat. And we talked to some US Navy servicemen. And they were like, oh, you Brits, you just came in on the ocean, right? Yeah, we just came in the ocean. And they're like, oh, what kind of ship is that? I said, oh, it's a Commando helicopter carrier. It's our biggest ship. And they were like, what? They were like, nah, you got actual carriers though, haven't you? I was like, oh, yeah, we've got like the big carriers as well. But it wasn't, it was like, that was our biggest ship. And it's just bizarre to me.
Wow.
Yeah, we docked. We had 5 days off in Virginia Beach, which was interesting. Then we got back on. We sailed down to North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, did some exercises around there, and then they gave us 10 days off in Florida. We went down to Jacksonville, like Daytona Beach. In fact, we went to Georgia, Savannah, Georgia first, and then Daytona Beach, and yeah. That was like what an introduction to the Marines. Work hard, play hard. Like we had Norway, we've been on ship. So it's like my first 6 months of being in a unit, you're ticking off all these key tenets of being a Marine. Norway, gone on ship, cross-training, obviously with the Americans. From there, I did a sniper's course, which was unusual for such a junior Marine. I then got sent up to a unit in Scotland. It's a submarine base. It's where all our nuclear subs are held. So all Britain's nuclear weapons are only on submarines. Don't have any land-based ones. And the story goes, I don't know if this is completely true, that the Royal Marines have to go to Scotland, to this base, to guard the subs and the weapons on them and where we store the weapons, because we buy them from the US. And apparently the story goes that, I don't know whether they just said this to make us feel happy, that the Americans wouldn't sell them to the UK unless they guaranteed that the Royal Marines were going to guard them. Anyway, not a very exciting job. It's, you go up there, you're guarding nukes. And I was like, okay, you can't do everything you want at all times. I'd had a good couple of years being a rifleman in a fighting unit. And then a new unit came on the horizon. And this unit was getting formed brand new in 2006. So the UK said, right, we've got a capability gap here. Our tier 1 special forces, SAS and SBS, are at capacity. We got Iraq and Afghan going on and other things on the horizon. We need something similar to the US, where they've got a tier 2. We've got Royal Marine Commandos and paratroopers, but we need something in the middle as well. So this unit was getting formed. I was up in Scotland. I'd only done about 5 months up there, and I got wind of this, and they went to volunteers for this new unit. And the best way for me to describe it to you guys in your terms would be if you took all your, I guess, MARSOC and your top tier airborne forces, whoever that might be, maybe Rangers or the airborne, and took them and put them into one unit together, and not just for a short amount of time, just saying, we're taking you, and you are now your own standalone setup unit, and your job is going to be to go and work alongside SAS, SBS, or Delta, the SEALs, as it might be. So this unit got formed in 2006, and I was like, boom, put my hand straight up, get me down there. Was accepted, and down we went. And I joined this unit, and I'd had a brilliant time already. I was doing everything I joined the Marines for, but I needed to go on tour. That's, a lot of people might call me a warmonger or gung-ho, anything like that, but I wanted it. I read these books as a youngster, and I wanted to go and see adventure. It didn't have to be full-on action, although it did as well. And this unit was going to give it to me. And we joined, and I remember the Sergeant Major, his opening brief was like, gentlemen, your feet are not going to touch the ground. If you aren't ready for this, there's the door. You need to get out of here right now, because I'm telling you, it's going to be 1,000 miles an hour. And it was. That was January 2006. Within 5 months, I was deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, as part of a Special Forces task force. And this was not only me getting what I wanted, my first taste of action and an operational tour, it was the very pinnacle of it, because I remember getting off the helicopter and that hairdryer hits your face, my boots hit the ground, and just thinking, yes, I've made it. This is exactly what I've been looking for. And this tour wasn't ground holding, patrolling, or going out and maybe looking for things. This was based in an area called MSS Fernandez. So it was a row of houses there, Millionaires Row they called it, from all the Iraqi politicians and things like that, mansions. You had SEALs, Delta, British SAS and SBS. I think your Green Berets were in there, and all those types of things in each different house. We were in one of these houses as well as the UK. I think it was Task Force 196. We had to wear American uniforms because the Brits weren't in Baghdad as an active force. There are obviously British elements supporting in Baghdad, but we had Basra and places like that. So British troops weren't out operating in Baghdad. So not only now am I on my first operational tour, I'm working alongside the SAS in this Special Forces Joint Task Force. We're driving around Humvees. We're wearing American, I think BD usually called them, like Black Hawk Down, the uniforms they were wearing in that film. We were wearing them. We're using night vision. Some of the kit they gave me, I hadn't seen until I got to Baghdad. It was like, we got off the helicopter, got to camp. There you go, there's your SAN sight to go on your SAW, LMG we call it, your SAW. And I was like, right, I better get down the range and start getting my head around it, because within 12 hours, we were on a helicopter, on a job. And this tour was kill and capture. It was high value targets. We had all the assets there in Baghdad joint, the drones, human intelligence, signals intelligence, tracking mobile phones. I mean, this is all in books, so I'm not giving any secrets away here of how we were tracking them. It's pretty well known. And that intelligence would come in, we'd get the call, and if it was in the city, urban, we get in the Humvees. If it was rural, we get in the helicopters, and we'd land on, go in, get them, depending on what their reaction was whether they came back with us or not, and out. And as a first experience of a tour, it was just everything I could imagine, and it was absolutely amazing. There was a few key moments from this tour. So we were 6 months out there. This was 2006, summer 2006. There's a few key events. One of them involved the Americans, not in a good way. We got ambushed by you guys, and we were in Baghdad in the city. We'd gone out on a nighttime job in the Humvees, got onto target, gone in, executed the target, and extracted, and we were driving off. And we were driving off in these Humvees, and in fact, when we'd been outside the building all night, there was a massive firefight going on to the north, and we'd sort of been mesmerised watching the tracer by it as well. Not watching our acts, not very good drills. So we knew there was a huge fight going on to the north of us, and I believe there were strikers out on the ground, the armoured vehicles, and we had eyes on this. As we were patrolling away from it, I hear this massive boom, and it's an anti-tank rocket being fired, followed a few seconds later by a massive whooshing noise, which was it going above our heads. So like, okay, turn to our left, contact, heavy machine gun fire starts just raining in on us. And at this point, I knew that it wasn't the enemy. Anyone that's been in a firefight with the enemy knows the difference between the enemy and a professional force. And we all knew instantly that this wasn't the enemy and this was a blue on blue. But of course, as anybody who's been in a firefight will tell you, the only way to stop someone shooting at you is to shoot back. So we did start shooting back. Eventually, I think we took a round to one of our tyres. Some of them bounced off the splash plates the top gunners were on. And then eventually it came down on the net that it was the Americans ceased fire. We were like, yeah, we do know it's them, but we had to make them aware that we also weren't the enemy. And eventually they ceased fire, and luckily nobody got hurt or killed in that skirmish. But it's quite funny then when we got back to camp. Of course, we wanted to know what had happened. Why had they contacted us and made that mistake? It was a new unit in theatre, so they'd come into theatre, they were still a bit new and fresh and twitchy. There'd been a lot of firefights going on that night. Not that this is excusing anything, because I'd like to think that anybody with superior night vision to us as well would, and we were in American vehicles, we weren't like we were in British Land Rovers, and you go, well, maybe they didn't recognise them, would tell the difference between us and a ragtag Iraqi insurgent group. But they were the explanations for it. Okay, fair enough, it happens, it's war. Mistakes are made. But it's quite funny to read the contact report as well. So we got to read their contact report, which said they witnessed the moving across east to west and engaged with anti-tank rocket and then heavy weapons fire. It said, we then started to receive very accurate heavy weapons fire to our vehicles. At this point, we realised it was not the enemy and called ceasefire. So, yeah, and other incidents, one where we did work together well was we were there for the coordination of the takedown of AMZ, Abu Musab Zukawi. He was the head of Al-Qaeda Iraq at that time. Obviously, he's number one target everyone was after. So we were actually on the ground the night he got taken down, and he got killed by an airstrike, which everyone, researchers that will know. And they'd locked him down, they'd found his location. Of course, then the Joint Task Force were like, we're going to take him out. We're going to airstrike him if we can before somebody gets there. But of course, knowing the way that we track people, and they're also aware of it. They're very savvy with their mobile phones at this point. They would only turn them on for a certain amount of time. Before turning them off, they had to use them. We're like, well, once we take him out, all these other players who we know where they are, but we're not taking them out yet because it's going to spook him. They're now going to go, well, if they know where he is, they know where we are. And they're going to bomb burst and leg it. So it was a huge operation that night of all sort of UK, US special forces. Let's just go out and take everyone that we know where they are. From the Iraq tour, there wasn't anything traumatic that I could pinpoint as affected me for the rest of my life. And I treasure that deployment. And that may surprise a lot of people. You went to Baghdad and you treasure that experience wholeheartedly, because I saw the very worst of humanity, undoubtedly. People just hell-bent on killing, maiming, disrupting and ruining everyone and everything. We also saw the best of humanity. People doing everything they can to save life, and not just my fellow servicemen, civilians. We used to go down and help out in the American hospital in Baghdad. It's called the 28th Cash was the unit there at the time. So anybody from that in 2006 listening, give me a shout. I used to love coming down to see you guys. And a bomb would go off in the city and you'd see all these casualties getting rushed in. It's just in complete mess. And then you'd see everyone just doing everything in their power to try and save them. And that is something that's stuck with me in a positive way for the rest of my life. It's just witnessing these people doing everything they could to save them. And it's just heartbreaking. The American soldiers would then come in as well. And one of the most heartbreaking things that I still dwell on from that was not the physical things that I saw. I saw bodies sliced up and blown to pieces. It was the more symbolic things where I'd see American soldiers get brought in, and then an hour later, 2 clear bags would come out with all their kit in and be placed down. And it's like, that's their kit to be taken away because they've died. So that probably hit me harder than actually seeing something. Was just that like, wow, it's as simple as that. There's a bag of their kit. But in general, I really take all the positives from seeing both sides of humanity. We got investigated for murder in Iraq. Yeah. And this is good to highlight the difference between the upper levels of the US and the UK command. And we have a lot of respect for how robust your commanders are in support of your troops. We got investigated for murder down in an incident in Basra, which we weren't operating in. But a target had come up down in British-controlled Basra. It was somebody who'd fled Afghanistan, and he was now skipping across the border between Iran and Iraq. He had a wife in each place, right? So if you ever want an example of how women are bad for you, this is it, because he didn't make it out alive. So the British forces that were down there were not deemed capable of doing this. It was a mission same as what we were doing in Baghdad. It was that type of, we're just going to go out, get him, and come back. So it was deemed that the British didn't have forces down there capable of doing that, so we had to fly down from Baghdad. Now, we always used to say, oh, we're on Baghdad rules, which an outsider might say, well, how are the rules different? Because the UK and US rules of engagement, I'd imagine, are pretty bomb-proof the same. Self-defense, warnings, all those types of things. But they aren't the same because it's how they're implemented. And I tend to find that when we were in Baghdad, we were allowed to, I don't want to say get away with, because that makes it sound like we were doing something wrong. But we did have a lot of leniency with, obviously because we were a Special Forces task group as well. But our commander said to us, write down what happened. You were backing us up. I trust your judgment, and write down what happened. I'll back you all the way. And the problem they'd got down in the south in Basra, the British, was they were scared to open fire because of getting investigated, which this proved the point completely. Scared of having to answer, go to court and be scrutinised. And this showed because when we were in Baghdad on American rules, this is how it played out. We went out after curfew, which is 11 o'clock, I think, at night, and somebody poked their head up over a wall. If you put a laser at them or fired a warning shot, they disappeared straight away. Because they knew if they didn't, it was an escalation and they were going to get taken out. Brilliant. So we're in Baghdad, we were completely happy with what we needed to do. We got to Basra, we went out in Land Rovers, it was a ground move, and people were everywhere on the streets. They were approaching the convoys, they had like fires going on street corners, and we were like, this is the Wild West, and we weren't used to it. We were like, what is going on? It's because they had no respect for the British forces down there, because the guys were just scared to implement the rules of engagement, like was being done in Baghdad. And of course, we'd come down there on Baghdad rules and started firing warning shots, shooting people if they weren't adhering to them. I think the British commander afterwards said they'd had more complaints in one night we turned up down there than the whole 6 months deployment. And I was like, yeah, because you should be doing it like the way we're doing it, and the Americans are doing it in Baghdad. We'd gone in, the murder wasn't for the target. That he did get killed. That happened. It was extracting back to camp. We got approached again. We were firing warning shots everywhere. We got approached by a car. It was driving towards us. I was on top cover with the SAW LMG. Full escalation. Laser straight through the windscreen. Moved it around to warn them. No reaction. Raised it. Fired a warning burst above the car. They swerved and then sped up directly towards us. So at that point, you're like, vehicle-borne IED, anything. Well, it doesn't matter. You've had your warnings. Lower the sights. And we took them out. There was two of them in the car. Car slewed to a halt. Pulled off to the side. We got back to camp, flew back to Baghdad. Day later, the army lawyer turned up to take statements off us because the British commander down south wanted an investigation into it. And yeah, it was a really stark reminder of how our rules are the same, but they're implemented very different, and how dangerous it could be. Because if we'd have been a British convoy and that had been a vehicle-borne IED, he'd have killed some of our troops. And that was because the commander was so robust. And I thought back to our pre-deployment training as well. They'd sent this army lawyer in to do like a 2-hour lecture about rules of engagement. So he'd wasted his time going through it all. And the commander stood up at the end and said, guys, don't worry about it. I trust every single one of you to do the right thing, and you will. So don't worry about that. You can see the lawyer stood there like, oh, cheers, I'm just wasting my breath for 2 hours. So a combination of that, and when the statements came to be done, there's always an element of, oh, somebody could push this, because it has happened. British troops have been dragged into court and charged. But I was quite confident because of our commander was really on side, yeah. And the fact that we had acted in the rules of engagement. So even if it did take us to court, it's like, well, we did follow the rules. So when we went on missions, we'd go down and sort of help out in the hospital. And we became friends with the gang from the radiology department. And I'd become quite friendly with a girl there, Kelly, still friends with her now. So each day we would drive from our camp down to hospital. We'd sign out a civilian car, with civilian clothes, take our pistol, and we'd drive down and drive back. On this one particular day driving back, we'd had intelligence beforehand that Al-Qaeda Iraq were going to try and kidnap a Westerner from the Green Zone between the 26th and 28th of September, this day being the 27th. This day we were driving back to camp, and as we approached a roundabout, could see 4 armed gunmen just start stopping traffic on this roundabout. Now, to have a weapon in the Green Zone, you either had to be in uniform or have some kind of ID on you. And these guys didn't. So, of course, our attention is sparked now. Why are they doing this? So Mark's saying, I think this could be like a snatch attempt or something. And I was like, no, it's probably just an incident. We can't see their IDs. As we started creeping forward, a gunman walked out of the woods to our side, right in front of us, in front of our bonnet, turned around and just pointed the rifle directly at us, AK-47. So at this point, we're like, right, this could be a snatch attempt. Thoughts going through our head. Now, Mark is saying to me, I'm just going to put my foot down and drive through him. And I'm saying, right, well, don't do that, because he's definitely just going to put a burst through the windscreen. And the two emotions being played out in the front of this car at the moment were quite different. And as it turned out, because I'm still sat here now, turned out to be the best option. Mark was quite hasty in his actions, trying to get the phone out to ring the QRF, wanting to get the car going. And I was like, well, we'll just calm down. I don't really know what's going on yet. Let's just work it out. And it's something I found out about my personality in later deployments, that is actually my natural reaction to certain incidents, is to just try and have a moment. Not too much of a moment, depending on what's going on, but work out what's going on quickly before I make a move. He started motioning for us to go up to the roundabout and turn out into the red zone, which was then Greater Baghdad, which is, of course, the Wild West. So Mark's saying, I ain't driving out there. And I was like, no, we're not driving out there. I said, but pull forward, act like we're complying with him, just so we can work out what we need to do, because we don't really know what our option is at this point. He hadn't asked to see our hands, which said to me that he was the sprog. They've sent the most junior one, because he's the most likely to get shot. They know we're carrying weapons, so they've sent him to be the guinea pig. He hadn't asked to see our hands, so of course got my pistol below the dashboard. I've cocked it, carrying a SIG 226 at the time. So options are do him through the windscreen and try and get out of there, or do him through the windscreen, leg it into the woods, which just off to our side. I said, right, well, let's just comply for the moment. So I sort of put my hands up to say, like, I don't know what you want me to do, acting dumb. And then we pulled forward to the roundabout. As we got past just off the roundabout, I had a better sight of the other 4 gunmen. It definitely didn't have IDs or uniforms. Mark, I said, stop, and we jumped out of the car. Jumped out, came round to my side, so with the car in between us and this sprog gunman now, drew our pistols and pointed them at him. So now he's confused, because the cat is out, amongst the pigeons. This wasn't meant to happen. These 2 Brits have completely mugged him off, and he doesn't know what to do. So he's calling for direction from the guys behind on what to do. So me and Mark are like, right, option now is we drop him, the others are about 100 meters away, and we leg it, because I'm a confident guy, but 2 pistols against 5 AKs are probably not going to come off best.
You guys don't have rifles on you?
Not for this.
And there's just 2 of you?
Just 2 of us, yeah. Wow. 2 in the car, pistols only. No rifles, nothing in the boot or anything. Because we deemed the green zone to be safe, which it is to a certain extent. And that was just the SOP. It was like we hadn't done something different. That was what we're told when you're driving on the green zone. Civvy car, civvies, pistol. At this point, Uncle Sam come along to save the day. So we're looking at the roundabout, just about to take action and leg it into the woods. And a US convoy approaches from a different direction. The 4 gunmen, unbelievably, stop the convoy. So this is a US Army convoy. And they're straight on the loudspeakers, Get out of the way. We are US forces. You are not authorized to shoot us. We will shoot you. Cocking their .5s. So I'm saying to Mark now, right, we're not going to open fire now, because if that convoy, they don't know who we are and they don't care who we are. If they see two guys in civilian clothing shooting in their direction, they're going to take us out. And if we weren't going to win against 4 AKs, we're definitely not going to win against a couple of .5s and 7.62. So at that point, the gunman then realised, right, the game is up. That was our window of opportunity. We've missed it. And they dropped their weapons and just leg it towards the exit gate. I couldn't believe my eyes, because these checkpoints have got Iraqi army and Iraqi police stood on them, who've stood there and watched this whole event take place right in front of them. It's just like as corrupt as you can imagine. And like afterwards, thinking about it, I'm like, we're out here trying to secure your country. Yeah, all right, we started it, but you're just willing to watch these terrorists who are hell-bent on destroying your country, because Al-Qaeda Iraq weren't there for the future of Iraq. They just wanted to disrupt anything they could. And stood there and just allowed them to just run out of the gate and disappear. And it was a surreal moment then, because we were like, okay, let's get back in the car and get back for dinner. Got back in the car and went back and reported it. And it was, we got back and still didn't quite realise what happened. We told like the lads and the sergeant, and they were like, that was a kidnapped attempt. Go to the ops room and report it. And we were like, oh yeah, it was, I guess. Just still sort of because it happened really quick. And it was taking about 10 minutes to tell that story, but it was so fast that it happened, we still couldn't quite process it. And then we realised about the intelligence going on. And the question is then, well, how did they definitely targeted us? Because that guy walked out. They stopped the traffic to make sure everything halted, and he walked out and pointed directly at us. They knew what car we were in. And the question is, well, how? Well, of course, each day for the past few weeks, me and Mark had been turning up at the same time of day, parking in the same spot. And to get into the Cash Hospital, there's two layers of security. You got the outdoor ones who are like third nation private security, like from Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Africa, and then the US troops on the inner one. So each day we're turning up, unloading our pistols, which we'd had concealed, showing our IDs. So they're going, all right, they're turning up in a civvy car, concealed pistols, slightly longer hair, not shaven. One's got British Army, the other one's got Royal Navy. Like, who are these guys? That's how we deduced that they've watched us over the course of a few days and then planned the snatch. Yeah.
Wow. Who knows what would have happened if the convoy didn't show up, huh?
Yeah, that's like Mark was like, we wouldn't have let them take us out into that red zone. But again, like us, we would have had to open fire. And again, it's like, what would have happened? We don't know. So that the best option to resolve that was that convoy turning up and saving our bacon. So you get back from Iraq or a general deployment, and what you would normally get then if you're in a regular commando unit, you get some post-operational leave, about 4 weeks. And then generally you're going to go back into something quite routine. And unless, well, even when we're in like a big rotation, when Afghan was just like a conveyor belt, you'd get rotated out and something more mundane will get spun up. We were part of this new unit now. So we're coming back. We get a little bit of leave. But it's like, well, when you get back from Christmas, we're straight on to standby, which is ready for anything to happen anywhere in the world. So our routine was a little bit of leave, and you were straight back into it, guys. Standby role for us was attached to an SAS squadron, and for literally any incident in the world that required a specialist intervention, we would be ready we were on 24 hours notice, kit packed, ready to go. Go back into, what we tend to do in our forces, after a deployment like that, where it's quite high level, or any deployment, you go back to basics. When you get back from your leave, you go back to individual fire and maneuver, small team tactics, all the way up to troop and platoon and company level assaults. So you take it all the way back to the lowest level of soldiering, and which is great, I think, because you can get rusty on that stuff when you're doing all the high level tactics. So we came back into routine, and something did happen in the world. It was, if you look it up in the papers now, it will still tell you that 4 or 5, we'll go with 4 British embassy workers got kidnapped on the border of Eritrea and Ethiopia in Africa. A notorious no-go rebel area. Like, why are 4 embassy workers going on holiday in one of these most hostile areas of Africa? They've been kidnapped by the rebel groups in these areas. Now, I'm not going to say what the actual score was, but if you watch Hollywood movies and a certain one with a British agent, you might get the gist of who these people actually were, not embassy workers. So they've been captured. So I was driving back to camp from, I think I'd been seeing a girl in Birmingham. I only had a basic flip phone at the time. I turned it off that night. I was driving back to camp on the Monday morning, stopped at a service station and bumped into some of the SAS guys I'd been in Baghdad with. Hi guys, how's it going? What are you up to? They were like, don't you know? I was like, no. They're like, you might want to ring your troop sergeant and find out what's happening. So I turned my phone on. Yeah, 4 people have been captured. Get back to camp now. And this was brilliant for me again, because I'd gone from becoming a Marine to now doing the most high-level, interesting things that could be asked of. Get back to camp because something's going on in the world and we're going to get called out to go and deal with it. Like, that's boys' own adventure, isn't it? That's exactly what you joined to do, to be on call and something happen, rather than just the routine deployments. And we got back to camp, and it was a couple of days of beat-up training. And this training I'd never done before and didn't think we were allowed to. We were landing on the range in Chinooks. The ramp was dropping. Before we'd even hit the deck, we were running off the back, shooting like targets, mimicking a hostage rescue. And I was just like, this is brilliant. We finished it, and at the end of it, the SAS liaison officer was like, well done tonight, guys. A little bit of work to do, but I'll see you on the plane tomorrow. And we were like, brilliant. Got on the plane, flew us out to Oman in the Middle East. Did some training there in readiness to go and try and get these guys back. We got flown to a US ship in the Red Sea. It was operating. I think it was on anti-piracy. It was called USS Ashland. Again, so anybody who was on that ship in 2007, give us a shout. Remembering us turning up. So we got on the Chinooks. They landed us on USS Ashland. And then we were spinning up to go and get these guys back. Unfortunately, we didn't have to go in and get them. They got released, and which was really interesting. And we were gutted. We were on this ship. I picked up my webbing, and I'd never felt it so heavy. With that much ammunition we were carrying, and we were all in for going in to do this. And then the call came, they've been released. And the official line is that the rebels got panicked because they didn't know what to do with them and released them. Again, without wanting to go into it, if you read the British government's official line of "we do not negotiate with terrorists," read that as, if you're someone like me, they don't negotiate with terrorists. If they are someone like high up in the agency that is in Hollywood movies, they do negotiate with terrorists. So they got released and we got flown back. But again, it was just another exciting adventure to be involved in.
Yeah.
Did that, got straight back and went on my parachute course then. So to get my para wings. And that course is usually, I think, up to 4 weeks long for the general airborne forces in the UK. We did it in 5 days because they just needed it. Right, basic ground training, get them up in the air, get them jumping out of the plane and get them signed off. So we did that in 5 days because jobs were coming up that they were thinking about parachuting us in for in Afghanistan. I remember at the end of that course, they formed us up in the hangar to present us our para wings. Well done, guys. And the CO turned up, who was a paratrooper, so parachute regiment paratrooper. And he was like, welcome to the airborne fraternity, guys. I mean, you're now part of the history of it, this, that, and the other. The reason we've rushed you through this is because there's a potential need for it operationally. He said, however, I will add that if the first company level parachute drop operationally since the 50s is done by a group of Royal Marines. I will personally drive to Buckingham Palace and hand my commission into the Queen. So it's quite funny because he was just like, you can't give the first company level parachute drop in 60 years to a group of Marines, not the parachute regiment. So we finished a parachute course and we're coming into summer 2007. We were still on global standby. But this then also covered if our forces need a bit of a hand somewhere as well. And as it turned out, they did need a bit of a hand in Afghanistan. Summer 2007, that's at the height of Helmand province exploding. Taliban have a summer offensive. It's obviously the opium season. They go out and fight as hard as they can. So it was deemed the British forces in Helmand needed a specialist presence to help them with what we call a surge. You guys do it as well, a surge op. You just flood it with more numbers and more specialists to help the guys who are already there. So we got spun up for that. It wasn't a scheduled tour, which was great again for me. It was like, well, when are we going to get our next tour? Probably next year. And then next thing they're like, no, we're going out. It was only a 2-month tour because it was a surge. But I was like, this is a bonus. This is an in-between I wasn't expecting. And it's my first chance to get out to Afghanistan, which is, I've done Iraq. Afghan's the next step now. And it was really hot at the time as well. And I always say to people now, and I say this in my book, that I volunteered for every single tour that I went on. And people look confused. They're like, well, of course you did. You joined the Royal Marines. Of course you volunteered to go to war. I said, yeah, but I individually did volunteer for each one. And because I could have got out of it or chosen a different route that wouldn't have taken me to kinetic combat tours. And this one, my father died the day before we were due to go. So July 2007, father died, and I went back into camp the next day, told Sergeant Major, and I really respect their reaction to this, and their action was, I told them and they said, okay, we're not going to tell you what you need to do now. You tell us what you want to happen. If you want to be on that plane, you can be on that plane. If you don't, we'll see you in a couple of months. And I thought that was just such a grown-up, brilliant attitude to take. And I was so glad they did, because I did want to be on the plane. But what I told them was, I want to stay to go to the funeral, and then I want to come and join you guys. And that's what happened. They left me behind, went to the funeral, rang up the mover and said, right, I'm ready to go. And off I went. Landed in Afghan. It was unexpected. My father, he died of carbon monoxide poisoning in the outhouse at the bottom of our garden from a lawnmower, which he'd been struggling with a few things, and he would sort of go down there and stay all night in this outhouse. He'd have a few drinks. He had like a DVD player and things set up in there and music. And so it was not, I was still living at home with my parents at this time. It was not unusual for him to not come back up to the house after being down there for the night. And yeah, a lawnmower had been left running all night. The inquest is an open verdict, and personally, there's two trains of thought. The lawnmower, my brother said the lawnmower had issues of cutting out. So my father had been fixing it and then testing it by tying up the thing rather than standing up to do it every few seconds. Maybe he'd had a few drinks and fallen asleep. Maybe he'd done it on purpose, but yeah. Yeah, land at Afghan's quite a funny story before I got stuck into all the usual stuff out there. I landed, of course I'm on my own now, you usually get there with all the guys and somebody organises you and pushes you in that direction. I land on my own, and was just the instructions I was given before I left. So I'd go and find the tent of Task Force 196. It might have been called something else by then, but go and find the tent of Task Force 196 and they'll sort you out. So everyone landed, all these other guys, they get taken off by their sergeants and everything, and I'm just wandering around this camp now, and Camp Aston was tiny at the time. It didn't have the massive runway that it went on to have. It just had a dirt runway that could take a C-130, tiny. Next thing, I'm jumped by a military police guy, And anyone who's come across them will know what they're like and how little patience we have with them. And he's straight on me. Where's your weapon? Where's your beret? And I'm like, I haven't been given a weapon yet, mate. And my beret's in my bag. What do you want? He's like, you're also not wearing any rank or insignia. And you're not complying to army dress regulations. And you're not conforming to army regulation, blah, blah, blah. I said, right, for starters, mate, I'm not in the army. And secondly, my task force are not required to wear rank or insignia. So either go and find the director of Task Force 196 and ask him why, or get the F out of my face. And it wasn't big time in it, because anyone who's come across those people will tell you that if you any point you get an excuse to mug them off, you take it. And I had one, and I gladly accepted it. And yeah, it was great just to be able to just chin him off. And yeah, my first Afghan tour isn't one that I look back on that fondly. It was great because it was different to Iraq, Baghdad, but it wasn't the kinetic tour that we wanted it to be. We were a surge, so we didn't have a defined task or role. We were just out there to support. And we got very frustrated. It was fun in a lot of ways. We were sort of like Mad Max. We had these vehicles. They're like, right, you're just going to roam around the desert, just looking for things. But then when we did find things, we were sort of held back. And our OC got a bit of a dressing down, our officer commanding, got a bit of a dressing down from the commanding officer. He's calling him a maverick. He said, every time you're on the radio, you're just asking me to take your men to go and kill something. He's like, well, that's what they want to do. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? So it just felt like whenever we would get close to getting stuck in somewhere, they'd rein us back. Oh, we haven't got air cover. Oh, we haven't got this in place. So it was really brilliant to have that first experience, but it was very frustrating in a lot of ways as well. And the only real highlight of that was on one day we supported an operation into a village called Zumbale. So some members of our group with the Afghan army had gone in there, and one of our guys got shot in the shoulder. So we sort of helped extract him out. And it was good. He didn't die, so I'm allowed to say that. He did, because the higher command, who had been quite restrained with us up to this point, they'd taken one to the guts, and they were sort of like, we want to go and do something about this. They've taken one of our guys, well, I haven't killed him, but they've hit one of our guys. We need to give him a bit of payback. So then I remember the moment we were sat in the desert, still a bit frustrated, and our sergeant walked over and he just said, tomorrow we get our day, lads. We're going in. So the next day, the plan was for the full company of Royal Marines, no troops, sorry, so about 35, 40 of us, to advance back in there to take them on. We drove up to the outskirts of it the day later, and another moment. In fact, this tour, it does stick with me for some good reasons. And something I'll never forget was we lined out behind this berm, ready to advance over into the open ground. And we all lined out, and it just came down the net from the troop sergeant, Royal Marines, fix bayonets. And it just like tingles down your spine. It just, even now, just to hear that. And he told us afterwards, it's like he'd been waiting his whole career to say that. He was a sergeant, and he'd never told his lads to fix bayonets. And yeah, and it just down the line, you could hear lads going, fucking come on. It riled everybody up, and you just hear the bayonets clinking in. We advanced in. We were in contact for about 6 hours in there. We'd advanced through a minefield, which we didn't know until we'd extracted that day. And we were taking mortar fire. It didn't come to close combat. We had thrown a few grenades at some point. And we were intercepting their comms and said, right, they were going to advance up a gully towards us. So we were just throwing grenades into the gully to stop them coming. It wasn't until we extracted from it that we saw one of our vehicles with like its back end blown off, smoking, and a lot of engineers pointing at us to go a different way. And from that, we were then told that this vehicle had been coming to resupply us in contact, and it hit a mine through the direction that we'd walked that day, which again is really sobering thought, isn't it? I think for me, a lot of people say, oh, do you dwell on things that have happened in combat, people being shot and explosions, things like that. I think I dwell more on the things that didn't happen. Like, how close was my foot walking through there to being blown off? And how close was I to not making it out of that Baghdad kidnap thing, and a lot of other situations like that. I do dwell on them a lot more, of the what ifs. Yeah, so that was the Afghan tour. It wasn't massively kinetic, but again, it was a bonus in the bag. For our training teams, for like a troop of 55 recruits, you'll have a drill, one dedicated drill instructor, and then you'll have corporals who will do all the weapons and tactics training and things like that. So it's slightly different, whereas you might have, I think you just have drill instructors who do it all. We'll have people with different specializations, a physical training instructor he just takes them for runs and fitness. And then the guys will do all the general training with them. And then when they need to do drill, they'll go off with the drill instructor. Towards the end of my corporal course, the unit I had joined as a young Marine, I did my tours in, the specialist unit, had come calling again, which was great for me. They wanted me to go back there as a corporal. So this is amazing. I'd been there as a young Marine and a Lance Corporal, and I was getting to go straight back. I had a couple of years doing a very rewarding job training recruits, getting that side of it, developing my own instructional techniques and development, and then going back to this unit, which I knew was going to be busy again, doing all these type of jobs. But before that, they wanted me to go on a jungle warfare instructor course. They were deploying to Belize, Central America, in the new year, and they wanted instructors to instruct their lads when they went, extra instructors. So I was pulled out of the training job to go and do a 7-week course in Brunei, which is at the tip of Borneo. It's an old British colony, like most of the things in the world. Sultanate at the top of the island of Borneo in South China Sea, to do a 7-week jungle warfare instructor course. So that wasn't just going to the jungle to learn how to do it. It was, so they took me there, teach me how to survive and how to fight, but also then teach me to teach people how to survive and fight in the jungle. So that was a 7-week course in Brunei. Did that, went to Belize to train my lads in jungle warfare. A little bit different jungle from Brunei to Belize. Go from like 3-story canopy, primary jungle. It's more secondary jungle in Belize. And then again volunteered for a tour. So the unit at this point had separate companies. She had a company of paratroopers, or 3 companies of paratroopers, and a company of Royal Marines. Now it was deemed that the 3 troops within the Royal Marine Company were going to get dispersed into the parachute one, so they'd all be completely mixed. And I was in F Company, and I knew that C Company were going to Afghan next. And this would be a very different Afghan to the one I'd done. So I wanted that. So I volunteered then to be moved when the split came, to move from F Company into C Company. And that's what happened. Went there as a corporal, and we went straight into build-up training for the Afghan tour, which was Oman, again, desert training. And then later that year, 2011, we deployed out for a 6-month tour of Afghan. A really memorable tour. Of course, it had its bad points, extremely bad. But for the job I was doing, this was, again, just another level up. And that's what I loved about all my tours, was none of them were exactly the same. They were a bit different and a bit more edgy and a bit more testing on me. So this one, of course, now I'm a corporal, so I'm going to be team commander. And the job for this was, we had a base which was about 10 miles down the road from Camp Bastion, or Camp Leatherneck, which when you guys had one there as well. And the job was training and mentoring the Afghan special forces. So you had the Afghan army, who were pretty chip shop, tin pot, substandard. Not that the guys we had were amazing, but they were a level above. They were vetted a lot more, rigorous training, and they were paid more, not just by the Afghan government, but they got a supplement from us as well, paid. So this job was brilliant, and my job was to be implemented as a mentor in a troop of Afghans. So they're sending me out on the ground. It's classic small team, old school mentoring. just me. Sometimes I'd have a second in command with me, like a young paratrooper or a young Marine. And we would go out with 25, 30 Afghans with just us embedded in amongst them. We'd have a HQ element, which would be a bit further back, controlling the two different groups. But it was just, you're right out on a limb, because these Afghans had no allegiance to me, especially. At any moment, they could just turn on me. But we were just out there, and we had to put our trust in them as well to go and do the job. So it was, we'd train them on camp, and then we'd take them out, pretty robust baptism of fire, to see how the training panned out in the real world. And that was a tour. There were 3 rotations on the tour. One was a quick reaction force. One was helicopter assaults, so just doing a series of helicopter assaults whenever a target came up. And one was vehicle interdictions. You just go out into the desert, try and find the drug runners and the weapons caches and things like that. Memorable points from that tour, the first one and the most memorable one, was in December 2011. We were tasked to go down to a village called Yak Chal. It's important to note as well is on this tour we had a US attachment with us, a unit called the 4th Anglo. I believe they're reservists based around Virginia Beach area. And they were JTACs, forward air controllers, people like that. So a team of like 4 of them, and they were with us for the 6 months. So they were permanently based with us. And then within their team, they would send 2 or 3 guys out on each of our missions. So in the December, we were tasked to go down to this village called Yak Chal in southern Helmand. No Allied forces had been to this area for 18 months before we'd been there. And as we got to find out, for good reason. But one thing that stuck with me about this was the intelligence officer before we went. His opening line was, "Nobody's been to this village for 18 months. And then he went on to say that he didn't believe we were going to be taken on with small arms fire. His assessment was, they make the bombs there, they develop them, they're not going to take you on. And he ended it with, they simply won't take you on with small arms. Which, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a weapon that can be carried at the strength of a man. Now, I discounted this the moment he said it. Because one, the moment somebody advises you about going on the ground that has never actually been on the ground, or never does go on the ground, you can discount everything he says straight away. And nobody's been there for 18 months, so how does he know nobody's going to shoot at us? So the job was set up, we had to drive down to a fob Price. I think it was held by the Danish troops at the time. And then a British army unit would drop us off in the desert for us to patrol into this village. So we had 2 of the guys from the Anglo, US Marines, with us that first day, Jace and Errol, Jason Errol. This again was brilliant because it was nighttime. They dropped off in the desert and we had to patrol in the darkness. So this was proper commando tactics now. We're patrolling in under the cover of darkness. We're going to get into the village and then we're going to start clearing our way through the compounds. It was freezing. We took December, so winter tour in Afghan, absolutely freezing, fingers are numb, just praying for the sun to come up. So, because I was like, somebody starts shooting at me now, I don't think I'm going to be able to operate the trigger and shoot back. And from the moment we got in there until the moment we left 2 days later, they started shooting at us. The first contact, we got into a compound, and I honestly thought that one of the Afghans had turned his weapon on us, because the ferocity and noise of this gunfire coming at us was so large, I thought somebody must have turned their weapon on us, or the enemy had got into this compound and started shooting. They weren't. They had ambushed us, one of our groups who were now out in the open, and we had to go and react to that. Funny moment is after we'd patrolled out to engage the enemy, we won the firefight, it calmed down, and we patrolled off. We come into contact again, and all I remember is just this massive shock wave hitting me. Boom. Dumped backwards on my back, feet in the air, dust blown up everywhere around me, ears ringing, and first thing is my legs. Straight glance down, have I still got my legs? Yes, I have. Next thought is, well, has everybody else got their legs? Because somebody must have stepped on something there, because that has knocked me on my ass and created a massive shockwave. Looking around, couldn't see anyone with anyone was a casualty. I'm trying to work out what was going on. I then looked to my front and see an Afghan soldier loading another RPG into his launcher. He just discharged the first one right in front of my head and just knocked me on my back. And the worst thing was, then he fired the RPG off into like the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere. So you weren't even hitting the enemy. We had a young lad, Nige, young paratrooper, who was my second in command that day. He then crawled up to me and he was carrying a 66 launcher. And I'm like, Nige, why are you still carrying that 66 launcher? And it was his first ever tour and his first ever firefight. I'm like, you will never get a better shot at legendary status than getting a 66 down in your first ever firefight. He didn't fire it for the whole 2 days. He must have just liked carrying it around, I think. So that first day, that set the tone for the whole day. We patrolled in, they started shooting at us, and every time they shot at us, we'd push forward, take them on, they'd withdraw, they'd let us push further, they'd attack us again, and that was the theme for that first day. Towards the end of that first day, we had one last compound left to clear. And as we were patrolling across this open ground, I had Jace, the USMC JTAC with me. And I said to him, right, Jace, I said, we'll get the Afghans to go in to clear that compound. And then once they're done, we'll patrol off into the desert, call it a day. I could see a depression ditch just in front of me and say, right, when we get to that ditch, we'll drop down, take cover there, let them do their stuff, and then we'll call it from there. Yeah, roger. As we got to the ditch, and I've dwelled on this moment, like we've talked about with the maybes and near misses many times in my life. As I dropped to a knee at that exact moment, click, 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 contact. Click, 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 contact. Dropped to a knee and I heard Jace shouting, fucking hell. And he later on explained to me the reason why. At that moment, I was like, it's probably something to do with the heavy caliber machine gun fire ripping towards us. Later that night, he told me, as we got to that ditch and I dropped down to a knee, the tree directly behind me at head height had just exploded into splinters. And it's just like that conscious decision I took at that moment to drop into that ditch was the difference between life or death. And yeah, very, very sobering thought when he told me that back in the layup position in the desert that night, and I pulled my sleeping bag out to get a couple of hours rest. I was just laying there thinking that at that exact moment that I took a knee, somebody had his sights on me and was looking directly at me, ready to pull the trigger, to put those rounds into me. And it's just like, those tiny little differences are just really sobering when you lay there and think about them. So we laid up for the night in the desert, a couple of hours, and the plan was to go back into the village from a different angle. So the next day we patrolled in, and we had a shura meeting with the local elders in the village. They of course gave us there's no Taliban here. If there are, we don't know about them. And I just got the feeling that he was going to kick off again. It's something. It was like something from the day before we've just had. It's going to kick off again today. And we patrolled into the village. My team took cover on a slightly bit of higher ground with a compound. And as I was perched over the top of the wall, sort of observing it, there was a large patch of bare earth in front of us, and then sort of the main compound villages and some greenery just beyond that, which was our destination. So as I was taking cover over the top of this wall, we get contact. So it was me, Nige, my second in command, was standing just to the side of me, and we both watched a line of rounds come straight up the earth in front of us and go straight up the wall in between us. Both ducked down and like, fuck in hell, and then got back up and started engaging. And again, it's like we both watched it. It's just that line of rounds, it's almost in slow motion, watching it just come up and go right in between you. And again, thinking of somebody's got his sights set directly on us. So we start firing back in contact, get the Afghans firing back, most of them firing in the wrong direction as usual, and try to suppress the enemy. We then get a call on the net, the most chilling thing any soldier or Marine can ever hear, man down. So of course we are man down, and the first things on your mind is, who is it? How bad is it? And what do we need to do to assist this? Word comes through that it was one of the 4th Anglican USMCs, Major Sam Griffith. He was a jet pilot, and what I love about the system that you guys have is that your jet pilots will do a tour on the ground, so they can understand the atmospherics. So when they're back in their plane and we're on the net to them going, I'm in the shit, get me some help, they know exactly how urgent it is. And it was Sam. He'd been shot in the head and killed instantly. They were just down towards the left of us, so we could see the commotion and see what was going on. Killed instantly. So then all thoughts were completely suppress the attack, because we need to extract him back slightly and get a medevac. I think it was called the Pedro. You guys called it the Pedro. We called it Mert. To get the helo in. So we called in a Chinook to extract the casualty. We pushed forward into the village after that, so we stayed on the ground. And this came up when I was a sergeant later on in my career. We had a scenario where they said, before an impending tour, how do you feel about... We did a scenario in training, and we took a casualty, and then we pushed on afterwards. And in the after-action review, they said, do you think we should do that for real? Or do you think the guys would be adversely affected because we've taken a casualty? Would it put us in more danger pushing on? And I drew on this experience, and I said no. I said, because if you'd have told me at that moment that I had to withdraw, I would have suffered with that a lot more in the future than I do, because I'd have felt like a coward. I would have felt like we've taken one to the guts and we've thrown in the towel and walked away. So I at that scenario, I was like, I don't think that is the best option, because I would have struggled mentally for a long time after that if we'd have just gone, oh well, let's leave. We needed, for my own sanity, we needed to push on into that village and go further. And we got to one corner, and I saw a nice neat pile of rounds, empty cases. I actually got to lay down and look back from we deemed the person who killed Sam, that was a sniper in a different location. But the one who'd most definitely had been the one that nearly shot me and Nige and put those rounds up in the middle between us. I got to lay in his position and look back at where we had stood and put myself in his shoes and go, wow, this is the position somebody was laying, looking at my face, ready to put a hail of bullets into me. 300, maybe 400 meters. So not a massive distance. He probably would have been on iron sights as well. So it would have been RPK, belt fed with iron sights. So, I mean, it's pretty accurate because the roads went between us. It's about 400 meters, I think it was, yeah. One thing about that, when we talk about ceremonies and memorials, is one thing I got to experience after that was Sam's ramp ceremony, which I'd never witnessed before. So on the way back, after we'd finished the mission that day, we got back to our fob, and then we had to drive all the way back to Camp Bastion. So we got word that the ramp ceremony was happening on Camp Bastion for Sam, and of course we're knackered, we're tired, and we're covered in blood and sweat, but we want to be there if we can. So we stopped off on the way back and got to experience it, and it was a mixed feeling for me, because I was stood there on this runway in the pitch black, waiting for his coffin to arrive, shivering, not because I was the cold as such, but I just had no food or energy or anything in me really. And a guy next to me, US Marine, started to talk to me, and everyone must have been wondering, because they were there in their crisp, clean uniforms on camp, and there's us covered in shit and blood and unshaven, looking like a right bunch of ragtag. And I started to talk to him. I heard somebody whisper, "Oh, look at the state of them. Glad to see they made the effort." And I just started to get angry. I was like, how dare they judge us? They don't know. Obviously, they didn't know we'd been there when Sam had been killed, but how dare they stand on this camp with all the luxuries and judge us? And it is a bit of elitism in me, definitely. But I just couldn't control it. And I just felt this anger wash over me about their reaction to us. And that was memorable to see. Sort of, they came in and then we all collapse in after it and follow it to the ramp. And then and off he went to be flown back home. It stayed kinetic, so job's pretty similar to that. And helicopter, a lot of helicopter airborne assaults. And I love them. And it's one thing I talk about in my book. The book was nearly called 1 Minute, because there's something in my career that has happened that evokes an emotion in me that I could never replicate ever in anything else in life, even close to it. And that is from a helicopter assault. Is you'll be flying into target, sat in the back of this helicopter, it's pitch black. Also, you got all the noise, the diesel fumes. And I remember for this one particular one in this village, it was called Fulad. And we were taking a whole task force in. An American armoured unit had been pushing the Taliban up the village for a couple of weeks. They were putting up some resistance against the tank unit and then withdrawing to the next one. And this village was the last one in the line of villages. So it was their last stand. They had nowhere else to go. So the plan was the armoured unit would start the armour rolling before dawn to provoke the guys in the village to come to the defences to the south. And then we were going to land behind them, smack bang in the middle of the village in the helicopters. So this was the plan. It was a perfect plan if that was the case. Unfortunately, it didn't work like that, and they didn't react to the armour, and they stayed in the village. The rumours were there were up to 1,000 of the Taliban in there. I was corporal, and my job as corporal on these helicopter assaults was I'd be the last man onto the helicopter, ensuring I was the first man off. So I'd count everybody on, get them on, and then take the seat. So I'd be the first man off. And I just loved this. You'd be approaching target, and it'd just be this moment of calm. And the tail gunner, the air crewman at the back by the ramp, would just turn around, and to the man closest to him, me, would just raise one finger and through the noise shout 1 minute. And that moment I can't replicate it. It just signifies that in 1 minute's time, this helicopter's going to drop to the ground. That ramp's going to go down, and nobody on earth knows what lies in wait. We certainly don't on the back of this helicopter. You've just got to run straight out of that ramp into the dark and face whatever is waiting for you. And it's just something, that feeling is just, something I can never really replicate. We did go in that day. As we come off the helicopter, our other helicopter, we were the first wave. So there was a couple of waves coming in to different parts of the village. We landed on. We come out under fire. I got to a tree line, and then I just looked to my left and I could see our other helicopter taking fire. It had a massive boom, which I believe was an RPG. Some think it was a recoilless rifle. I thought it was an RPG at the helicopter. And then the helicopter and the Taliban on the ground just trading fire. And I was just mesmerised by this arc of tracer fire when I should have been checking my arcs to the front because we were getting engaged as well. And then that helicopter just banked off and left. And then I'm like, shit, an hour's left. I'm like, well, we're on our own now. And it just dawned on me that this three or four Brits and Americans and 30 Afghans are now in a village of Taliban in the pitch black on our own. Luckily, the other helicopter, it landed in a field further away. So then they patrolled in and met up with us. And then we systematically cleared that village.
Did you ever?
So got my third tour out of the way, my second Afghan, and I got promoted again. So I must have been doing something a little bit right to start going through the ranks. Went and did my sergeant's course, back down to the same camp that you do your recruit training in. And then they sent me back to the same unit again. So it must be the first time in Royal Marine history that the branch advisor, manager, who usually stitches you up and gives you an undesirable role, came and found me and gave me the job that I wanted. They needed somebody to go back to the unit because it was about to go to Afghan again. But they didn't have time to send somebody who hadn't been to that unit before, because we used different weapons and different equipment and different tactics and worked with the higher echelons. So they're like, we haven't got somebody, take somebody and train them up to go in. We need somebody who's been there before. And you've just been made sergeant. We need a sergeant. Do you want to go back? / you are going back. So that was brilliant for me. I just come straight off operations, done a promotion course, and I was going straight back into it. In the meantime, before going on my final Afghan tour, I was put on UK counter-terrorism. So within this unit, we have guys, which I think works a bit differently with our special forces, is our SAS and SPS are also in charge of what we call the black role. So if somebody hijacks a plane or takes over a school or any sort of terrorist incident on the UK mainland, our special forces are there to deal with it. So like the Iranian embassy siege, quite famous, 1980. So in that interim, we were on black role. So we were given response cars. You do the sort of counter-terrorist training as well in all the black kit. And then you're on call for incidents around the UK. We did have a couple of like call outs where there was an incident on a plane, but we never actually had to go in and do any terrorist things. But really interesting, because you get to go into the London Underground. They close off or they use like a closed down underground station, and then we go through taking down a terrorist situation there. So we got to do that. Quite funny story actually. This response car I got was an Audi A6 with integrated blue light fit. So like the police get, and they just flick a button and all the blue lights come on integrated in the car. So I got given one of these for response. Really handy on a Friday afternoon when you're trying to get home from base and there's a load of traffic on the motorway. Just flick the blue lights on into the hard shoulder and you get home an hour quicker. Highly illegal, but you got to take these perks when they come up. And then we moved on to my final Afghan tour, which was in theme similar to my Baghdad tour, as in we were attached to an SAS unit whose job was to stay in one base and go out. And this wasn't any vehicle-based stuff because it was Afghan, so it was more rural than Baghdad, but it was the same theory. High-value targets, as soon as they ping up from intelligence, we go out, we take them out. And what was interesting about it as well was that this was 2014, leading up to when British operational combat presence in Helmand was due to withdraw, which was November 2014. And Camp Bastion was collapsing and closing. So our job during this 6 months was to take any focus away from the Taliban attacking Camp Bastion while they packed it up, ready to leave. So it was just distraction, taking out any key players involved in the organisation so that Camp Bastion could be left alone to pack up and leave. That was our main job on that. So in 2019, the time came where I had to consider my future in the Royal Marines due to medical issues. My hearing had been deteriorating for as long as I can remember from joining, especially a lot of operational tours. And it came to the stage where my left ear had pretty much completely gone. Took a hearing test and they said the same and said that I would have to attend a medical board to decide whether I would be able to continue in service or be medically discharged. This was set for October 2019, and if I were to do my full 22 years, which is the basic full career you can do with the British Armed Forces, you can extend if they want you to and you want to, but it's generally 22 years, you retire, get your pension if you want. 5 years short, so I've done 17 years at this point. And it was very much in my hands as well. Before going to this board, the higher officers would come to me and say, look, you're very experienced, got a lot of qualifications, got a lot to bring to the party. We want to keep you in service. Rather than retire you and have to pay you a pension early, we want to keep you in, keep paying you, but get something from you. So I said, we can shape your report when you go to the board for them to keep you in service. So I really had to make a big decision because my head and heart were fighting daily about this. Because 17 years this had been not just my job, everybody knows that. It's your life, it's your ethos, your persona, everything. So I had to make a decision. But also my health was deteriorating and I had to leave at some point. I couldn't stay in the Marines for the rest of my life. So why not now go out on an absolute high with fond memories, looking back at it, thinking that was amazing and I'm never gonna regret it. Rather than hanging on and maybe ending up resenting it, because I wouldn't be able to do the same job. I mean, I was colour sergeant, so I'm not gonna be kicking doors in anyway, but I was weapons and tactics my whole career. I wouldn't have been allowed to go near a weapon again if this was gonna be the case. If you told me before I joined everything I'd gone to do, I'd have said, no chance. All the courses, all the operations, everything. I would have said, that ain't possible for someone to do. So I had to weigh it up. Do I want to go out on that high and forever look back fondly, or maybe hang around and end up resenting being in service? I bought a craft beer bar in Swansea, my home city, with one eye on this. Well, that's because when I left, I didn't want to go and work for somebody. I mean, we all work for somebody in some way, but not directly. I didn't want to go and get a normal job. I wanted to be my own boss. So I had one eye on that, and I think, do I want to be now down on camp, on parade? Staff are ringing me, the toilets are flooded in the bar, and I'm now like, oh, I wish I was back there to sort it out, and then ended up resenting my service. So I made a decision. I'm going to go to this board and say that I will accept a medical discharge, which was really hard. But I made a decision and that's what I went for. Went to the board and they agreed that I should be discharged from the Royal Marines. And then I had to start weighing up the transition phase, because in many respects, it was the perfect transition. I already had a project, not just a new career and an income and everything, but a project, because throughout my life, I always needed a project. Even when I was on leave, I had to go and do something. So this was everything that could occupy me and stop me getting into that trap that we all fall into in some respect. And I fell into massively. And I think I went on a downward spiral from that moment. And looking back on it, one of the biggest things that I allowed to affect me, and I still can't really get my head around now, was how that discharge came around. I went to the board on a Thursday and they said, yes, you now to be discharged from the Royal Marines with immediate effect. Report to the admin office tomorrow morning. Okay. So I went to the admin office and reported. Now, I wasn't expecting some sort of fanfare because I was leaving. I'm aware that I'm a small cog. So I wasn't expecting some grand thing. But I wasn't expecting this. I turned up and the civilian behind the desk, I said, right, there's my papers. I'm to be medically discharged. She took it. She handed me a sheet of A4 paper and said, okay, go and get those stamps from the departments on camp, bring it back, and that's you. I went, what do you mean, that's me? She went, you can leave. I went, all right. Do I have to come back Monday and report though? She went, never again. Get that stamped and disappear. And I just walked out of this office with a piece of paper in my hand, in civilians' clothing, and went, that's it. That is it. And like I said, I wasn't expecting something amazing, but I was not expecting that. I was thinking maybe, oh, I'll have to report next week, speak to the careers advisor, because I had terminal leave. Well, you get resettlement, so you get like a couple of months to go and retrain, they give you some funding, and then you terminal leave. So I wasn't actually leaving until February, still getting paid. But nobody wanted to see me again or talk to me or engage with me, and I just couldn't get my head around it. I was like, maybe they want to get some knowledge off me or anything. And that was just such a clean cut that I just struggled with it for months. I just couldn't believe that was it. And that was it. I got some stamps. I drove home. And in fact, I had to hand a couple of bits of kit in, I think a helmet and a respirator. And I delayed doing it for about 2 months because there was something in there going, once you hand them in, it's really, really done. Maybe somebody's going to call you, or I don't know what was, but there's something in there. It was just hanging on still. And I didn't think it was going to be like that. I just thought, yeah, I've accepted it, and it really caught me out. So I had my resettlement terminal leave. I wasted it in theory, or in reality. I should have used it to do more courses. I had the bar, so I just decided to work in the bar, drinking too much. And I was just sleepwalking to when the final moment was where they stopped paying me, and I went, right, well, I have got to really do something. But some of you might be thinking, late 2019, what's around the corner here? You know what was around the corner? So, COVID. My official discharge date was February 2020, late February 2020. And I was like, okay, I got business, got something to focus me and take my attention, and I have a project. I will now go on as full-time manager of that and director. And that's the plan. And of course, a month later, the UK, I think it was March the 20th, the UK's first official COVID lockdown. Boom, business closed. I lived on my own. I'd never been married. I had a young daughter who lives in the USA, lived there and still does now. Everything I'd known for 20 years, like in the reserves as well, before I joined the Marines, had now gone and been taken away from me. And I couldn't leave the house. There was 1,000 other things I could have been doing with my time, but and that was the key thing. There was nothing I had to be doing. And for the first time in 20 years, I had no accountability, responsibility, structure, routine, nothing to keep me in check. I've gone from, I'm the guy telling people when to turn up and what we're going to do each day, to now being, well, I don't even know what I need to do today. If I just sit here in my pants drinking whiskey all week, which is pretty much what happened during COVID, nobody's going to be on the phone going, why aren't you turned up for this, mate? Where are you? And my best friend summed it up years before. He said, I'm worried about you. He said, you've lived your life 1,000 miles an hour. Your father died, you went to Afghan a week later. He said, you never stopped to take anything in, to process it. He said, everything you've seen in Iraq and Afghan and done and experienced, you've never let it get processed. You've just gone on to the next adventure. And my career was like that. And with myself, any leave periods, I'd go and live homeless for a week, undercover, or in a migrant camp in France, and do these other projects that would spike a little bit of adrenaline or something in me. So that whole career wasn't just the Marines keeping me busy, it was me keeping myself busy. And he said, at some point, that's going to stop and it's going to catch you up. And it did catch me up massively. And I will never blame COVID or anyone else or anything else. I allowed myself to fall into this hole. I 100% take responsibility and accountability for that. But the circumstances did create a perfect storm for me to allow myself to fall fully into that hole. And that's how it happened. I just started, my daughter lived in the States as well, so there was no chance of getting to see her. I just started drinking and watching films from my childhood. Goonies, Stand By Me, Predator, up to then Black Hawk Down, and obviously then reminiscing. And I did get time to dwell on all these things, the near misses, the what about this, what about that, thinking about people we killed and got investigated for or just killed. And strangely enough, people we didn't kill. I remember on one of the Afghans, we attacked this position and then we had to go into the woods because there'd been a couple of runners into the woods. AC-130 Hammer was above, talking me with a thermal imager, talking me onto this position. He's laying down. On night vision, pitch black, and I actually stepped on this guy and then heard was just about to put 2 rounds into him, and then he heard, no, mister, which humanized it. And I didn't. So then we captured him and took him back. And it was times like I sat there and just wondered to myself, like, what happened to that guy? What happens if he was let off? Because we handed him over to the Afghans. And, well, we know now the Taliban are in charge of Afghans, so he probably is free, even if he wasn't before that. And I'll never know if that was the wrong decision, not shooting him. So that was playing on my mind as well. Everything just started to come back because I was allowed to now think about it. I ended up drinking. I wasn't causing harm to anyone else or anything else apart from myself, although I was, because my family had obviously then become worried. My mother, brother and sister ended up in hospital on numerous occasions. And this was the thing about it. I never had an urge to drink normally. I was a social drinker and, to party or let off steam. It would always be a conscious choice. I was never someone in life that would always be like, oh, I need to have a drink. And it was the same in this until I got into it. Once I started drinking, then it does consume you. And it's like, you do need to keep drinking now because the withdrawals are going to be torturous. And I would drink myself into hospital, and some sort of intervention would happen, like hospital. And then they'd release me. They'd have me there for a week, get vitamins inside me, detox me. They'd release me, and then I'd be on form. During the COVID, our NHS, our health system, I delivered over £20,000 worth of food and support to them in and out of the COVIDs. A project. It was like, right, well, I'm out of hospital. I don't want to drink. That's fine. I need something. So I was delivering all these food aid packages, training, and getting into a routine. But it just wasn't enough though. It wasn't enough there to stimulate that old thing I needed to keep me occupied. And then I would slip. Foolishly, it wasn't again from an urge. I would just say to myself, I'll have a drink tonight. I can control it. And I guess we'll all get that superiority complex from what we've done in life. I can control it and control anything. I've done this, I've done that. And the truth was I couldn't control it. And then I'd slip. One of the hospital visits, I'd escaped because it was just torturous to me laying there in this big ward with everybody. It wasn't just people like me in there, it was people with broken legs and ruptured hernias and everything, like screaming in the middle of the night. I'd escaped to go and get a drink. Managed to get I still had like the cannula hanging out of my vein in my arm when I walked into a shop. Unbelievably, they served me with like a bottle of gin. Necked it, walking. I was going back to the hospital, fully intent on going back. And I did end up going back, not in the way I wanted. I necked it, collapsed in a ditch. Luckily, a nurse walking to work had spotted me and come to my rescue, because if she hadn't, then I would have died in that ditch, because I got put into a coma, woke up like a couple of days later or something, with a nurse saying to me, wow, we didn't think you were going to wake up. And you just think, you go through all that in life and it ends in a ditch outside a hospital in your hometown. And just so grateful that lady caught me. And a lot of people ask, well, I ended up in for want of a better term, in old school money, a mental institute. I don't know, we call them a psych ward, something like that. Like for a week in this specialist hospital unit, which caters every kind of addiction you could think of, from smoking to scratch cards, everything. And it was one of the most enlightening weeks of my life. It reminded me a lot of being back in the Marines and being away at war. It felt like I didn't have to worry about anything on the outside. Like when in Afghan and Iraq, you don't worry about the bank's going to be calling me about this, the insurance company about that. I've got to go to Auntie June's wedding and I can't be bothered. All these little petty things which shouldn't matter, somehow they do in the normal world. When you go away into that environment, nothing matters. Your existence is very simple. And simple is not to be confused with easy, because we all know going to combat operations is not easy. But when you're there, your life is very simple, straightforward. You know what you got to do each day. You mean keep yourselves alive, hopefully take out some enemy. All right, keep yourself hydrated and eat, and then recycle. And I think a lot of guys struggle when they come back, not just from leaving that transition, when they come back from tours. You go back into normal life, and you stood in the post office and you're getting scorned at by some old woman because you can't fill the form out properly. And you're like, 2 weeks ago I was in Helmand province and directing 1,000-pound bombs and stuff, and now I got some old lady berating me because I can't fill in a form properly. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, leaving that environment where they feel safe. It should be strange to say a lot of people, you feel safe in combat. You're like, yeah, because the people I'm around and the purpose I've got. And when I come back, I lose a lot of that. Suicide's a big issue with veterans in the UK, and unfortunately, it's going to get worse. I don't think we've scratched the surface. Afghan is still a fairly recent war, so is Iraq. We're already getting the issues from it, and they're going to manifest themselves a lot more in the future. You look at stats in the UK with the Falklands War in 1982. More servicemen killed themselves after that conflict than died in the war. And not just as of now, that's been a stat since the 90s, not long after that. And I think it's going to get worse the more guys, because there's still people serving, and there's going to be for a long time who've been to Afghan, and like I've just said, it's keeping them occupied. They don't have to think about anything. And a lot of guys are going to end up retiring, getting older, and it's going to catch them up. And indirectly as well, we've got a problem with veterans committing suicide. And also indirectly, where they're not killing themselves directly, but the life they've slipped into, similar to the one I dipped into and was managed to pull myself out, that's going to kill them. And a guy I was on a sergeant's course with, he was a sergeant in the Royal Marines, had died a few weeks ago because he'd ended up on the streets. He'd lost everything, addiction, and he hasn't taken the knife or taken the pills or whatever, but he has killed himself, and it stemmed from those issues. So it's double-pronged in that way. And it is difficult because it's so hard to diagnose the exact issue of what's going on. When I was in that situation, all the professionals wanted to go PTSD. Because as soon as they hear my history, they're like, it's got to be PTSD. And yeah, all right, that is the most logical conclusion of why I was in that. But I don't think it was. I think we've all got it affecting certain parts of our life. But for me, that wasn't the sole purpose of it. It was just that bad timing. I'd hit a bit of depression and I'd lost purpose for a while, and I allowed myself to be overcome by it. But it's such a minefield, PTSD, because there's so many different strands of it, and it's so difficult to pinpoint, and how to treat it. How do we treat it? The barrier to finding out what's actually going on, you're stopping finding out what's really going on because you just go, PTSD. Yeah, but look a bit deeper, you might find it could well be PTSD, but it could be something else as well that we can treat. Like with me, it was just getting me back into a routine and giving me a bit of purpose and structure. So putting that umbrella up and just going, PTSD, well, that's just a blanket term and it's not helping anything. And unfortunately, a bit of a taboo subject, there are people taking advantage of it. I know a guy back in my home city, he was a paratrooper, and he's getting himself into all sorts of trouble, and he's drinking and stuff, whatever. And I know for a fact that he's just blaming PTSD for a lot of it. And I don't doubt that it is going on there somewhere. But it just seems there's a lot of people as well, and I might get some flack for this, but in any walk of life, you'll have people who will take advantage of something. Unfortunately, people are then using it as an excuse for certain behaviours, which has got its own problems. I do see now. I don't believe that somebody should take advantage of it. 100% not. But I do see how it could get blurred and a grey area, because when I was in that dark position, and all these professionals are going to me, it's PTSD, we're sending you to a PTSD specialist. And I was going, no, I think it's just some mild depression or something else. No, PTSD. I'm then internally questioning it. I'm going, well, is it? Because I don't think it is, but if this doctor's telling me it is, he must know what he's talking about. Maybe it is. And I'm also then thinking, is it easier for me not to take advantage of it, but to just go along with it for now, just so I do get to speak to somebody? And then maybe I can get through to them and they will look at other options. So there's a part of me going, should I just go along with it for now? If he's saying it's PTSD and he's a doctor, it might be, I don't think it is, but yeah, okay, then send me to see someone else. And when I go speak to them, I'll go, all right, I don't think it is. So yeah, it's a minefield. In between one of my Afghan tours, I began this project called Tramp Face. Now, I think a lot of guys who've served will experience this, especially if they're single, whereas you get given leave periods after a really busy time, and you're sort of stuck of what to do. And you need to combat that, because there's only so much going for a run and then going out to get drunk and going for a run you can put up with before it becomes quite dangerous. And I identified this about myself, is that when they gave me time off, I would waste it really. I wouldn't do anything productive. Well, I would go for a run and things like that, but I needed to find something to fill that gap to stop me just wasting it. So I started traveling on my own. I used to, because we get time off in October and none of my mates, they're all married and stuff like that. They can't just take 2 weeks off in October to go traveling. So I'd just go away on my own. Lone wolf trips, and that satisfied my appetite for living this life at 1,000 miles an hour. And then it got to the stage where, when I was on the UK counter-terrorism role, we had a couple of weeks off over Christmas and we weren't allowed to leave the country for obvious reasons. We were on call out in the UK. And I was like, well, I can't just sit at home at Christmas and not do anything. So I came up with this idea to go and just live homeless on the streets. Undercover. And what I mean by undercover is not to get like a police officer or something, to get criminals, but dress, act, have a cover story like the other homeless people, sit there and beg each day and sleep rough, just so I could find out what it's really like. Get treated by the public as an actual homeless person. Speak to the other homeless people and get their actual stories rather than just what they want a member of the public to hear. So I started doing that and found out that this would occupy my time brilliantly. The first year I went to do it in my home city of Swansea with a friend. So we went out, slept rough, begging every day, interacting with the services as well to see how homeless people get processed in different support services. And also we used to raise money for charity. We'd go to the library each day. The overriding rule was we could do anything a homeless person could do. So we go to the library, which is free, and do an update for our social medias to encourage people to donate to charity. We raised about £5,000 for a veterans charity that week. And then we decided we want to continue with it. Let's do it every year on our Christmas or Easter leave. So the second year, we're like, well, we can't do the same again, because people are going to be like, we're not donating for that. You did it last year. You've already proved that. So we're like, well, let's up the ante. So the second year we went to France. Now, the migrant issue in the UK is just as big as it is in the US, although yours is a bigger issue because of the numbers and involved. But politically, it's just as big an issue. And on the border of France, there's a town called Calais, and they have a huge migrant camp. They'll call it a refugee camp. But the fact that they've crossed numerous borders and thousands of miles to get there, and they can pay a human trafficker $4,000 to get them across the channel on a boat, doesn't really tie in with that they're refugees. Anyway, we decided to go and live in that camp for a week. So we went across, and we couldn't really be undercover like we were in Swansea because we didn't look like 99.9% of people in these camps. So the cover story for this one, which when my friend came up with it, I was like, no way in hell is anybody going to believe this. But it turned out to be the one that when we had to roll it out to like charity workers, that they actually believed. The cover story was that we were French Foreign Legion. We had jumped the wall because we didn't like it in the Legion. We were now fleeing the camp in Paris and we're trying to get back to the UK. But of course, when you join the Legion, you have all your documents taken off you, ready to give you a new identity. So now we're without papers and we're living homeless in France until we can get word to the UK government to get a safe passage across. And yeah, we went to live there for a week just to see what it was like. Third year, we hitchhiked around the UK under the same rules, living homeless each place. First day, thumb out, whoever picked us up. If someone did, where are you going, guys? Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Newcastle. Well, Newcastle it is then. Jumped out, went homeless, and bounced around for a week doing that. Fourth one, we cycled Swansea to London over 5 days, living homeless while cycling. 2 days homeless in London, and then ran the London Marathon on the last day after living homeless for a week. And then the fifth one, which was the most audacious one, caught a lot of attention in the UK, was we went back to the migrant camp and we thought it was hot topic in the news that they were coming across on these boats in large numbers on dinghies across the English Channel. So we were like, well, how hard or easy is it to smuggle yourself into the UK as a migrant? Our friend drove across, brought us a 9-foot dinghy with a small engine. We pumped it up on the coast of northern France in the dark and set off across the channel. Took us 4.5 hours, undetected, made it to a beach in England, high fives all around, and pulled the pants down of the UK Border Force. We got arrested about an hour later because if we were actual migrants, we'd have legged it when we hit the beach or handed ourselves in, whatever the preferred option is. We, of course, had to pack everything up, meet up with our friend. And after an hour, people looking at the beach gone, 2 guys in boats have just washed up. Yeah, hello, police. Might want to come and look at this. Which caused a few stirs because I was still serving in the Royal Marines at the time when the Commandant General had his door knocked by the Navy, saying one of your Marines has just been arrested for human trafficking in the English Channel. It was really lucky because I'd done a few of these, 4 of them by this point, and I'd written 2 of them into books at this point. Luckily, they'd burst in, one of your Marines is blah, blah, blah. Luckily, his bagman, his junior officer next to him, that was sat there as well, was my old training officer in my last unit. And the CEO of that unit had bought 2 of my books. When in fact, he hadn't bought them. I gave him to him and he gave me the money. He'd read 2 of my books. So luckily this young captain was sat there, whoa, hang on. He isn't smuggling people across the channel. It's Westy. He does this for charity and fun. So luckily he was able to calm it down as in, right, no, he's not a human trafficker. We know about this, yeah. So where I am now, I still own the cafe bar in Swansea. Miraculously got that through 2 years of COVID closures, and after 5 months of trading, managed to survive. So we still got that. That is also now the base of, I founded a military charity back just before COVID as well. So it's fully registered status, veterans charity. That's based at the business, which is really handy because I let it live there rent free. We let veterans use bicycles for their well-being. We have coffee events and we give them discount on other things and general support inside the premises. So that's great. Other projects then, I've got a YouTube channel called Wolf the World. So that's a little bit of my traveling around the world on my own. Bit of the sort of adventurous crossing the channel in a dinghy. That one got some really good exposure, 200,000 views. And that's a big test for me because I know nothing about editing. Well, I didn't before I started it. So it was like a baptism of fire. I got 4 books now, 3 of the tramp face ones. So they're the living homeless and in migrant camps. And my autobiography, which is stuff that we've covered today and a little bit more about my life, my tours, and a little bit of the dramas I had on leaving. Currently working on the audiobook for that, which is hard work. I've recorded it in voice it's the editing that's taken me a bit of time with that one. So that's hopefully going to be out in the next couple of months as well. And yeah, trips to the US to see my daughter, and just trying to keep myself back on that track. I had a really dark period during COVID, and luckily I don't drink apart from special occasions now, which is a good relationship to have. A lot of people come out of it and go like, I can't touch a drop again, or they slip back into it. And that's a good thing, really, because the habits you're in the Marines, where you just power drink at every opportunity, wouldn't be good if I was still doing that now, because I own a bar, so I could drink every day. So I'm in a pretty good place in that respect as well. Just like to say thanks, Josh, for having me. I've been a big fan of the podcast for a while on my runs, so absolute pleasure to be here. And any advice for you young thrusters out there, potentially in the same position I was in before I joined, looking for an adventure? Because for me, it didn't have to be the military. I'm glad that it was, but just not really sure of your future, but you want an adventure. Don't listen to that guy in the recruiting office who doubts you if you're too skinny, right? Ignore him, and you got to go for it. Because the one thing I learned through all my struggles and all my successes in life was to follow my instinct. And even though at the time where I thought I need to make a decision, and I didn't know why I was making a certain decision, it all somehow turned out to be the best one. So follow that instinct, and if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly.